But I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash the.
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work.
It's crap. It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in here for Alex Phillips on the home of common sense. That is Talk on the weekend breakfast show from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And blimey, what a load of stories that we have to take you through today. But I'm going to remind you, listeners, this show is about you. We want you calling, voice noting, WhatsApping, texting and messaging us on X. And I'm going to tell you how to do that now. You can WhatsApp, voice note and call on 0344 499 1000. You can also text the word TALK to start your message to 87222, and you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. But what are you going to call in, voice note in and text in about? Well, what a load of stories we have for you. First of all, the continuation of the disgraceful and disgusting decision by the Court of Appeal to overturn the High Court injunction to close the Bell Hotel to illegal migrants in Epping. We're going to be looking at the fact that Lord Justice Bean, the leading judge in the case, has been reported to Standards complaints for the fact that he has, let's be quite frank, some political bias. Why do I say that? Well, he's the former president of the Socialist Fabian Society. He's a former Labour Party member of 28 years. In fact, Michael Crick was saying he's even a former Labour parliamentary candidate. Can we really trust Lord Justice Bean to park his party politics to one side when it comes to us trying to get rid of illegal migrants out of hotels, despite the fact the government keeps telling us they are on our side, they do want to see the hotels closed by 2029, but refuse to say where they'll put the hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants that are currently in this country, either awaiting a decision or awaiting what I hope will be deportation. We've also got more Angela Rayner news. Well, blimey, she just can't stop being on the front pages. We found out that she bought herself a luxury pad in Hove. Then we found out that she got some very good tax advice on how to save herself 40 grand on stamp duty. And now it turns out her partner, Sam Tarry, who works for a lobbying firm, has just helped or has been involved with the firm that's client has received £280,000 grant from the very department Angela Rayner runs. There is no commitment, there's no comment to suggest that anything has been done unlawfully. I want to make that abundantly clear, but it does look a bit murky, especially when Miss Rayner, who castigated anyone who wanted to buy a second home, particularly in seaside towns and resorts, because she said it priced local people out of the market, now has also said that we need to end the revolving door of dirty lobbying historically, albeit now her ex-Labour MP partner seemed to be cashing in through the firm Head of Strategy, the luxury that he's enjoying. And then We'll also be looking at the fact that Kemi Badenoch has been saying it's time to drill, baby, drill, basically, in the North Sea, castigating some of the very things that Boris Johnson was responsible for doing back in 2022, and saying that Ed Miliband needs to be taken on. And then, of course, you guessed it, the Church of England can't help itself. The Archbishop, or the Bishop of York, who's the acting, essentially, Archbishop of Canterbury, is the most senior figure leading the Church of England, whilst an Archbishop is still awaited to be appointed. We got rid of Woke Welby, with all the fact that he was pretty poor when it came to dealing with historical claims of child sexual abuse. Well, the Bishop of York is now wading in, guess what, to talk about illegal migration, and saying to Nigel Farage that basically he's not serious about tackling the issue or understanding the root causes of it. So, of course, we'll listen to you, Bishop of York. Why would we listen to the experts? Why would we listen to the voices of the people? Why not just listen to someone who is wearing the cloak and using it to push their own petty politics from the pulpit, when actually people just want to go to church to learn about God, the teachings of God, and understand how we can rebuild Christianity in this great nation of ours, something which you, Bishop of York, are responsible for trying to do, albeit you seem to be spending more time, as I say, wading into political affairs, maybe considering yourself a leading politician. No one thinks you are. And the sooner you're out of the House of Lords, the better for the country, and most importantly, better for the Church of England. Well, there's my morning rant to get you all going. As you can see, I'm fired up, fueled off tea, but I've also got now an amazing friend of ours here on Talk Radio, one of the best political commentating voices in the country. He is also the host of the Fire at Will podcast. He is Mr. Will Kingston. Good morning, sir.
Oh, good morning, mate. There were shades of Robin Williams in that introduction. The good morning, Vietnam. I loved it. I'm into it. I'm excited.
Well, fantastic. I know you've had your shots of espresso this morning to get you going. Thank you for joining us in the early hours of the morning to share your views.
Nowhere I'd rather be. I've had a few shots of coffee. Now I'm heavily caffeinated, ready to go.
Well, here we go. Well, let's get into our first story, which is, you guessed it, more about the Epping protest. Now, what amazes me here is a leading story in the Telegraph, quoting, ladies and gentlemen, one of the illegal migrants in the hotel in Epping. And this is his quote. I want to say thank you to Sir Keir Starmer and his government. I am delighted with the news. Wow, this is really amazing. That's Qadar Mohammed, a resident of the Bell Hotel, quoted on the Telegraph. It was also mirrored in the Yahoo News as well. He also wanted to say that they're not criminals, despite the fact that there's one person currently charged with 3 counts of sexual assault, accounts that they deny. He also says, and we must feel sorry for this individual, the noise and protests are bad. We can't leave the hotel and have been told don't speak to protesters. Well, Will, guess what? The people are angry and mad because a hotel that is meant to help fuel the local trade industry through hospitality, retail, leisure is taken out of service, stuffed with 138 individual young men, and then some of whom have gone on to commit crimes that are currently being investigated and, in fact, even charged. I mean, well, it's nice to see that thanks to Keir Starmer's on the right side of history here.
Yeah, well, make no mistake, they are all criminals. They have entered the country illegally. That makes them criminals. If they wanted to seek asylum in France, they could have done so. If they wanted to seek asylum in any number of the safe countries between Somalia and France, they could have done so. They didn't. As a result of that, that means that they are shopping around to determine, well, which, benefits package is better. Is it the, silly French government's incredibly attractive benefits package, or if it's the silly UK government's incredibly attractive benefits package? This is shopping around as an economic migrant. It doesn't make you, it makes you a criminal in my eyes.
Well, absolutely. Like you say, I'm so bored of hearing people saying, well, they're not illegal migrants, they're asylum seekers, they've not broken the law. Well, yes, entering a country without a visa and throughout a point check is an illegal act. If I was to try and do that into America, I would rightfully be detained. If I was to do that into Brazil, Argentina, other countries in around even mainland Europe, guess what? People would say, no, there is a point of entry which you need to go through, and that's how, in some cases, you can claim asylum if you're legitimate. But as you say, these are predominantly men coming via a small boat, choosing to pay smuggling gangs. No one's forcing them, choosing to pay thousands of pounds of smuggling gangs to get to the UK, enjoy their phone, enjoy their accommodation, enjoy their 3 meals a day. But you know what? We saw Ryland Clark getting pillared for speaking truth on this morning's ITV's flagship programme. And in fact, the Mirror, you won't be shocked, Will, has decided to fact-check Ryland Clark and say that he was horribly wrong with all the things he said and what a nasty man he is.
Yeah, and we'll get to Ryland Clark in a moment, but there's just another thought that I have on this Somalian bloke. And that is the fact that he is listening to Keir Starmer, that he's on top of the political movements in the United Kingdom, I think is fascinating. And it goes to show that the messages that you send as a government of this country have a direct impact on the actions of smugglers and on the actions of the people who are trying to enter. And this is the key thing. There has not been clear and unambiguous messaging to people smugglers and, more importantly, to these illegal migrants to say, if you come to this country illegally, you won't be allowed to say. I know that Keir Starmer now belatedly on social media is starting to talk tough, but they don't believe him. They don't believe him. They know that he's a soft touch. And I think the Australian experience, who actually did get on top of this problem, the first thing you've got to understand is that the messaging that you put out, the symbols that you send to these people is so incredibly critical in the outcomes that you will get. And unfortunately for too long, the UK hasn't understood that.
I find it really funny when I see the tweets from Keir Starmer where they've taken a few photos clearly at some detention centre like probably a year ago saying, you come to this country illegally, you will be got rid of. And the ratios on those tweets are quite extraordinary. The British people are simply not buying what he's selling, especially when this is the same man who gives his big reset, I don't know which one we're on now, I mean reset 50 maybe, but big reset speech to take on Nigel Farage on immigration, says that we're an island of strangers. He finally says something the public actually agree with him on, and then months later goes, oh, I regret using those words. And by the way, I didn't even read the speech that I gave that big day. And then it was once the U-turn got backlash, went, no, wait a second. The sentiment was what I felt. I just didn't mean the exact island of strangers. So you U-turn on the U-turn to only end up, we're back where we are, which is you're the biggest fence-sitter wobbler about. And the splinters in his bottom must be extraordinary.
Yeah, well put. The tragedy for the United Kingdom is this is a man who is just so ill-equipped for the moment. There was 14 years of Tory government. Obviously, we've talked about the challenges that government faced and the failures of that government. But the fact of the matter is, in effectively a two-party system, you know, one party gets to go for a period, then another party gets to go. So Labor were going to go in regardless of how good or bad the Tories were. But the shame is that at this particular moment in UK history, you needed someone who is willing to actually cut taxes, to go for growth, not just say they're going to go for growth. You needed someone who is tough on immigration. You needed someone who is, you know, not this sort of bureaucrat, administrative nothing, but who actually had conviction. You needed a Thatcher type of person, but instead we've got the person who is just so fundamentally out of touch with the mood of politics pretty much across the Western world now in 2025.
Well, do you not think, Will, that this, remember their landmark deal with France, 1 in, 1 out as it's billed, although we know that's 1 out, 17 in. And by the way, just for listeners, you do the maths, that's a 94% chance of staying in the United Kingdom if you come via small boat, to the point where I think one paper reported that someone had come over via small boat recently saying they had applied to the 1 in, 1 out scheme, hadn't heard back, so thought, well, I'll just chuck my money into a smuggler and come across instead. And lo and behold, they're now safely in UK shores, probably in some fancy 4-star hotel.
Yeah, that's right. Well, this is the thing. All of the measures that they are talking about when it comes to illegal immigration are tinkering around the edges. 1 in, 1 out. You know, we'll pay France to try and stop some migrants coming over. We'll move people from hotels to HMOs. This is all tinkering. And if you're tinkering, you're not going to change anything. Everyone knows that the way that you solve this problem is detain, then deport. And then saying to anyone who is around the world, if you come to this country illegally, you will never stay. But because this is not in the DNA of the Labor Party, because their base are so fundamentally opposed to the concept of borders, because they hate the idea of the country full stop, they're never going to do the tough work that is required to actually solve the problem. And the people know that.
And isn't it amazing with Labour? We've seen Graham Stringer, Labour MP, come out saying we should just leave the ECHR. He was a Brexiteer. I think Graham Stringer is old Labour. And what I mean is the Labour Party that knows actually how to win elections because it's socially small C conservative. Yes, economically more centre-left, left-wing, but ultimately I think is the type of thing that can charm the British public. Then you've got Steve Yem, another Labour MP in Mansfield, saying we need a Rwanda-style deal. The irony of that wasn't lost on me. Then Lord Blunkett and Jack Straw, both again former Labour Home Secretaries and Justice Secretaries. Very much, I think, Lord Blunkett sometimes is more conservative than some Conservative Home Secretaries. Coming out and saying at the very least we should suspend elements of the ECHR for a period of time, as Germany have done, for example, to allow us to tackle the migration crisis. And we know straight away, what does Keir Starmer do? Come out and say, we're defenders of the ECHR, despite the fact that France ignores it, Spain ignores it, Italy ignores it, Germany ignores it, well many more times than we do, because they understand that if they want to even have a political chance of surviving, they've got to put their people first.
But this is interesting, right? Because, you know, this Labor government doesn't seem to have any conviction, any guiding ideology, any principle. And Starmer is the embodiment of that. But to the extent that he does have something that binds his worldview together, it is international human rights law. It is globalism. That's what he spent his career doing. That is the only thing I can see that really he is passionate about. And here's the problem. That is the one thing that is stopping us from solving this problem. That's the one thing which is holding the United Kingdom back. This bizarre international law framework that most countries don't give a toss about, because they know that ultimately the whole world doesn't work that way. International human rights law is basically the geopolitical equivalent of socialism. It's the idea that everyone should do their bit. And we know that socialism doesn't work economically, and it certainly doesn't work geopolitically.
Well, absolutely. And then we go to the fact that we've had, obviously, this complaint now put in about Lord Justice David Bean, the allegation against him, and the complaint's gone to the Judicial Conduct Investigations Office, alleging apparent bias. Stephen Barrett, KC, who says Bean should not have sat on the appeal, points out the fact that Lord Justice Bean is the ex-chair of the Fabian Society, former treasurer and office holder of the Society of Labour Lawyers. God, he sounds like a right laugh. And his role, he also had a leading role in founding Matrix Chambers, which Ms. Stephen Barrett, KC, says characterises and is associated with pro-migrant advocacy. Now, again, just for listeners' and viewers' sake, there's no alleged wrongdoing at this moment in time. Simply an investigation will now be undertaken following a complaint that has been made. But of course, there's very serious questions here about the neutrality of our judiciary. And again, the UK has a proud tradition of trusting the judiciary, but time and again, particularly in migration cases, we're seeing lawyer after lawyer who's now a judge coming up and having made decisions that simply don't add up. Last week I had a reporter from The Sun in here, saying how one judge who had been a part of a legal system that said helped asylum seekers be able to stay in this country, went on to say that we should not deport a Jamaican convicted rapist after serving a sentence because he could face persecution at home. Well, not our problem, certainly not the victim's problem, that's a him problem. And then we've now got here Lord Justice Bean, Labour Party member, Labour Party activist, in fact former Labour parliamentary candidate. It just reeks.
Why do you think that in the United States the battle for Supreme Court nominations is the most important thing that happens in their political cycle? Of course, lawyers and, of course, judges are going to have biases. That's, you know, human nature, unfortunately.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. The problem is twofold for the UK. Number one, it is obvious that there is a particular left international liberal elite bias amongst now the majority of the judiciary, so there isn't that balance that you would find. But number two, the legal framework that Blair created and the Conservatives then ran with, unfortunately has put more and more power into the hands of those judges. So, you know, in the US you have elected judges, so there is some accountability because their judiciary is more political. The UK wasn't meant to be like that. The UK was meant to put power overwhelmingly in the hands of elected politicians, but this Blairite move to now make judges the arbiters of so many of these issues means that you now have these liberal lefty, well, I was going to say politicians, and to some extent they act like politicians, with the difference being they're not accountable to the people. No, Bean is a classic example.
No, exactly, and this is the problem, isn't it? That we want to see the judiciary neutrality, because therefore it's important the judiciary has a role in making sure that the executive, the Prime Minister, the government are held accountable in the interests of the people. The problem is so many decisions appear to be made against the interests of the people.
And this is the thing, like if you stop and think about it, this is why these things like the Human Rights Act and the ECHR are so dangerous, because you can interpret them any way you want. If you look at the way, to your point, that the ECHR has been interpreted, I'm trying to recall some of those provisions. You know, the right to economic well-being, I think, is one. You know, you can interpret these things in any which way you want. You know, I remember the one, my favourite, in a morbid way, was that parent who said that his kid didn't like Bulgarian chicken nuggets, and that was apparently a good enough excuse. So of course this is open to interpretation, and that's why you've got to take that interpretation avenue away from these judges.
But do you not feel convinced, Will? We've heard over the summer that Yvette Cooper, whilst busy interrailing, and of course that politicians are entitled to a holiday. I just like to poke fun at interrailing. It sounds like a gap year with Ed Balls. But Yvette Cooper apparently is busy looking at Article 8 in particular of the ECHR, and Labour's going to come back with some plan to take it, because that's going to solve it, isn't it, Will? They're going to be really tough on this Article 8. Are you convinced that they're going to go far enough to be able to carry on the mass deportations that Keir Starmer is claiming credit for, despite the fact, I think out of the 35,000, I think the biggest chunk have been people who have voluntarily gone back and they've chosen to inform the Home Office that they've chosen to take themselves back. I think around 8,000 have actually been enforced, many of whom I think are returns agreements that have already been put in place by other governments.
Yeah, I have my doubts, Jonathan. I have my doubts. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, tinkering around the edges. The thing which I find incredibly frustrating about this whole conversation is that this country has done more for human rights, the concept of human rights, than any other. This has a proud history of human rights going back to Magna Carta. You've got 1,000 years of common law precedent which protects every single right that you can hear in the ECHR. And you've got these stupid lefties who will say, oh, well, if Reform wants to get rid of the ECHR, that means they want to get rid of freedom of speech. They want to get rid of, they want to allow torture, all this sort of stuff. It is protected under the common law of the United Kingdom. You don't need a globalist body to tell you about human rights when you're the country that came up with the concept of human rights.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Will, and I'm sure the listeners will be too. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to hear from you. Are you happy to hear Sir Keir Starmer being thanked by the illegal migrants inside the Bell Hotel in Epping? Do you think Sir Keir Starmer's willing to be tough enough when it comes to the European Court of Human Rights, Article 8 in particular? Do you think Labour will go far enough to take back control of our borders? Do you think Sir Keir Starmer's landmark deal with France, the streamlining of the appeal system, is going to work? Or do you think the only way is going to be reform UK? Do you like what Nigel Farage is saying when it comes to exiting the ECHR, scrapping the Human Rights Act, derogating from the UN Refugee Convention, and much, much more? And guess what? We'll be talking about that after the break, after Zia Yusuf has done a big interview in the Sunday Times talking about how Reform UK plans to be like Trump 2.0 in his second term, not 1.0. That means come in at pace and deliver for the British people. But is it too bold? Is it too ambitious? Is it almost too good to be true? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. That's how you call us, WhatsApp us and voice note us. You can also text with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222. And you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
What we're facing now is more tax increases. They're even threatening to tax our homes. They're threatening to tax anything they can get their hands on. And maybe people voted for net zero, but they definitely didn't vote to give up more of their money to the government. And it's effectively a tax on us, right? It's a backward tax. While families choose between eating and heating, Labour's plan is to just drive bills through the roof and to chase some net zero while China opens a new coal plant every week.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk for the weekend breakfast show, 6 a.m. through to 10 a.m. We've been talking about the Epping Hotel High Court injunction being overruled by the Court of Appeal and how Sir Keir Starmer's now getting lots of thank yous from illegal migrants inside of that hotel. We've already had Jeff text us in. Good morning, great show as usual. Thank you, Jeff. The migrants arrive here, have destroyed any means of ID, which means they have entered illegally and are criminals and should no way be allowed to stay, but be immediately deported, full stop. I think you are bang on the money there. Joanna from Salisbury, I'm happy to hear the migrants thank Keir Starmer. Another nail in the Labour coffin. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more either there. But I'm still delighted to be joined by a friend of ours here on Talk, host of Fire at Will podcast, Mr. Will Kingston, great political commentator and voice of common sense in our great country, albeit obviously an expat, obviously, as our friends that we allowed to go to Australia and they're making their way back.
Another one of those suspicious migrants who's found their way into the country and now you can't get rid of them.
Yeah, exactly. We'll keep you, Will. We'll keep you.
You may as well at least talk to them, understand, where they're coming from.
Exactly. Well, at least you know how to control your borders in Australia. Like, it'd be nice if we could do that in this country.
Well, it's interesting, right? Like, there is a blueprint there for the United Kingdom to pick up, lift and shift if they want it, but unfortunately, Keir Starmer doesn't want to do that.
No, and indeed not. And actually then we see Reform UK just seizing all the auction over this summer recess period. Weekly press conferences, big announcements, further defections in Wales, in Scotland, in councillors. I mean, it's been a great time for them, their Lawless Britain campaign, despite Fraser Nelson trying to tell us all that crime's actually halved. Yet, despite all the data that I keep seeing shows that crime is going up, and it's certainly not the lived experience. And Zia Youssef out there outlining once again big report around 600,000 people in their first term. Just for listeners and viewers' sake, it is about immediately arresting everyone who arrives illegally, placing them in detention centres that will be ex-military bases, quickly turned around like Nightingale-style prisons to detain individuals. That will create around 24,000 spaces. They'll then deport people either back to their country of origin. The Reform said they're willing to do deals with Afghanistan and other countries, and Eritrea, for example, or reheat the Rwanda deal and other safe third countries, or as a backstop to that backstop, the Ascension Islands as a way of getting people out. And then finally, scrap the Human Rights Act, leave the ECHR, derogate from the Refugee Convention and the Agreement on Torture, both based at the UN, introduce a British Bill of Rights, and then finally offer people $2,500 to choose to leave early before they are deported. I mean, first of all, what did you think? Do you think it's too good to be true, or do you think actually tuning in to hear from their politicians?
I think directionally it's very encouraging. As an aside, I continue to be amazed at Fraser Nelson's attempts to try and tell us that water isn't wet. It's strangely impressive in its own way. It is directionally very encouraging. A couple of thoughts. Number one, this is a triumph for media organisations like talkTV, for the online right-wing media, for everyone who had a courage to actually say that mass deportations are the right thing to do before it became what is now a mainstream thing to say. Don't forget that it was only 12 to 18 months ago that Nigel Farage was saying things like mass deportations will be impractical or too hard. He was saying it would take us down a very dark path. He has, in this instance, I think, followed the mood of the nation. And that means that, the average everyday people in this country who are outside migrant hotels, who are making their voice heard, are so incredibly important in driving the politicians to where they need to get to. That's number one. Number two is Zia Youssef saying that this will be Trump 2.0, I think is saying something, but I don't think he's quite saying what he wants it to say. And don't forget, Trump's first term was hamstrung because he didn't get a great deal done because of the blob, because of the administrative state who stopped him from basically implementing that vision. I think you'll find a similar thing if and when Reform gets into power.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I don't think they will be trying as hard as they can, but they need to find people who understand the inner workings of the administrative state in this country of Whitehall, who can actually push through all of those measures that you've just mentioned. My concern is the equivalent in the US would be a guy like Stephen Miller, who understands the ins and outs of Washington intimately, understood how to drive through the Trump vision. I can't see who would be the right hand to Farage, who is going to be making those sorts of inner workings happen. So we could find that first term, or sorry, the first 2029 term for Reform to be frustrating in the same way that Trump's first term was frustrating.
So I totally agree with you. I think that's the biggest charge against Reform at the moment, is explaining, not that I don't think they've definitely got the stomach to do what they're saying they're going to do. Yep. The question is, as you say, getting that through the House of Lords is going to be one hell of a challenge. Then if you jump that hurdle, the inevitable legal challenges. So how do you prevent it being bogged down in judicial reviews? How do you overcome the Supreme Court? How do you overcome, for example, as Yusuf saying that Reform's willing to renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement? How easy is that going to be? Will that be a sidetrack and distraction when you're trying to deliver mass deportations? Because, by the way, listeners, I was a Parliamentary Private Secretary, PPS they're called. It's an unpaid, most junior role within government, to the Secretary of State at that time, Brandon Lewis, in the Northern Ireland office. I'm going to tell you now, because I spoke to lawyers inside the office, you do not need to be a member of the ECHR to underpin the Good Friday Agreement. It's actually underpinned in the Human Rights Act, which is therefore UK legislation. So yes, there would still need some legal tinkering, but the idea we need the ECHR is for the birds, but Reform do have to outline how they can make that work with the Human Rights Act being abolished.
Well, I've got a question. You are a former member of Parliament. You understand the Westminster bubble better than almost anyone. Who are those people across the right wing, the right wing in the United Kingdom, who understand, who could be those sorts of strategists? I've actually said, and I've copped flack for saying this, I know he's divisive, but I think someone like a Dominic Cummings would be incredibly valuable to Nigel Farage in terms of actually understanding how the blob works.
You took the name, Will, right out of my mouth. Dominic Cummings. He is the only man I can see who is willing, got the stomach and the intellectual know-how how to rip apart the state. Now, we know that it's been reported that Nigel Farage and Dominic Cummings, I think, have met at least once and had discussions. For me, I totally agree with you. I would go to Dominic Cummings if I was Nigel Farage and say, look, I'm going to bring you in. I don't care about the media side show. This is what we're delivering. Now, Dominic, I find, is a guy that you just simply do a deal with and stick to the terms. The problem is, when he came with Boris Johnson and was allowed to rip apart all the stuff to do, you had Carrie Johnson and Herker in the background doing everything they could to get in the way, to frustrate, and to constantly brief against Dom. I think if Nigel Farage said, look, Dom, you come in, what you want to do with the blob, the civil service, I'm going to let you do. We're not going to get in the way. You have carte blanche to work with the Cabinet Secretary to get that delivered. On all this other stuff, this is the agenda. I then need you just to get on board with it and deliver it. Dom will probably go, yeah, sounds fair. And as long as Nigel then sticks to the terms of that agreement, I think Dom can get on board. He is the only one who I think has got the bravery and the vision and has enough know-how of people to bring in, as you say, to guide Nigel. Because whilst Nigel has a very loyal team around him, as you say, walking to 10 Downing Street, surrounded by the entire machine, you're going to need people straight away who know what's said in those first meetings, what kind of briefings will you get, how the documents are outlined to you in order to intimidate, to confuse, to tell you how difficult everything will be.
Yeah, interesting. And look, I have noticed that Dominic Cummings' media output has increased in the last 3 to 6 months. There's more podcasts coming out where he's putting his views forward. There was an interview on the Telegraph a couple of months, 3 months ago now, where he was saying things, and people, who are political observers would know that when they start putting their names out there and faces out there, it generally means they're open and receptive to conversations like this one. So I hope for the good of this nation that those two can come to an agreement, because I think that is the missing link for reform at the moment.
No, I totally agree with you, because again, Zia has been talking here about the fact that, just so the listeners know, in this big interview with the Sunday Times, he repeats the let's be honest, the walkback that was announced, that women and children will not be deported, that their new command, UK deportation command, will focus solely on males, predominantly single males, who are coming over. He says that also that they, which is going to be modelled, by the way, on the ICE in America. That means the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He says when it comes to doing deals with Afghanistan, it doesn't mean giving them new money. It means looking at the foreign aid. He points to the fact we gave Afghanistan £151 million of UK foreign aid last year. How can that be used? He said that he defends the fact he uses fighting age males when it comes to describing the men coming over. He says the public are grown-ups, which they are, media outlets in other forms, just so you know, who are capable of understanding what's going on, and says that some people simply coming from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria want retribution. They are a serious threat. What do you think to that, Will?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm concerned about the equivocation around women and children. Number one, the optics will look terrible if husbands are being deported and women and children are staying in the country. But it also just reinforces the whole two-tier narrative, which I would have thought Reform don't want to reinforce. The fact of the matter is the law is the law, and you've got to apply the law equally. It shouldn't matter about gender or any other consideration. So I think that's an interesting insight, and I think it probably shows that Reform are moving in the right direction, but I don't think they're as far as, say, Rupert Lowe's new outfit, Restore.
Oh, Restore Britain, yeah. Restore Britain, yeah.
Would be wanting to go on this agenda. So there's probably still a bit of work that needs to be done to push Reform to the promised land, as it were.
Well, as Will says, power to the people at the end of the day. Now, quickly, we've also seen a big story which suggests that Jacob Rees-Mogg, you talk about having figures to come in and help people in Reform UK. Rumours are that our allies around Jacob Rees-Mogg fear a defections on the cards. He's been very clear that he wants to return to Parliament. There may well be a by-election in North East Somerset and Hanham, with the current Labour MP under a serious police investigation, charges of which he denies, but very serious ones indeed. He's previously, Jacob Rees-Mogg, called for a pact between the Conservatives and Reform. Maybe he thinks that pact simply can't happen, but he is now quoted in this article saying in The Sun, "There is no need to put me on defection watch. There is no need to worry." And he's previously denied back in December 2024 when Richard Tice was teasing him on an Arrival network, "Why don't you come on over?" But is Jacob Rees-Mogg, do you think, the right type of person for Reform, or is Reform in danger of looking like Tory 2.0, which will undermine the very credible cause that they are the only party with fresh faces, with a fresh mandate, to rip apart this current two-party system and have the credibility with the public to be bold, to be radical, where the public simply don't trust Labour nor Conservative?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? And Jonathan, look, you're a very good person to talk to about this as an ex-Conservative whose instincts may be closer to Reform now than the faux Lib Dem Conservative Party. I think that Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of the very few politicians in this country that has genuine cut-through, that is genuinely can cut through the noise and people are interested in listening to. That is a rare quality. But at the same time, Reform, and we were talking about this off air, Reform are trying to brand themselves as the anti-Conservative party. The reason they exist is because of the failure of the Conservatives. And so if you start bringing in too many Conservatives, then people can rightly say, well, you're just becoming another member of the Uni Party. So they're going to need a few, because, you know, if to win government, they're going to need 300 plus, politicians, and they're going to need people with some experience as a new party, but yet too many. And again, they're going to have that brand of being just Uni Party 2.0. So it's going to be a very fine balancing act, won't it?
I think, like you say, you all know people inside Reform like I do too. I think that there is a feeling that Sir Jake Berry, for example, was one that people felt uncomfortable with because they didn't feel that he was someone that naturally fitted with the Reform UK philosophy, having been a big advocate, for example, previously around net zero, having been quite, I think, a passionate Remainer back at the time of the referendum. I know people inside Reform who are saying it's time to basically put out a list, which I think my name might be on, based on reportings previously, saying these Conservatives, during their time in office, were quite outspoken and said the direction of travel needs to be in this way. That is overwhelmingly in the same direction as Reform UK's values and vision. And ultimately, those would be the ones that we should take. But there is a time limit to join the train too, because we're not here to allow you to be careerists. If you want to believe in the cause, join the revolution, then you should be able to do so. And there's a lot of people saying in the membership, a lot of people saying, now's the time to pull up the drawbridge. Let's find our own talent from within. We've got all these amazing councillors being elected across the country. You know, George Finch there, 19 years old, running now Warwickshire County Council, for example, who joined us on the show yesterday. Why do we need to have someone with a voting record and a track record that goes so against what the people of this country want?
Yeah, and as tempted as I am, I won't put you what you would say if that list and timeline was out. That would be a very, very good approach. It would cut all of the nonsense and the speculation and the talk, and you'd have some clarity. So I think that is the way that reform should proceed.
Well, Nigel Farage is making the headlines again this Sunday because the Bishop of York, who is also the current acting head of the Church of England, Stephen Cotterill, decided to do an interview with Sky News where, of course, he didn't come on to talk about God or religion or faith. He wanted to talk about illegal migration, and I think we've got a clip.
Response to those people who are saying...
I think we've just paused there. We'll get that clip back up, don't you worry, because it is a great clip, because we'll make sure that we know what he says. But just so you've got some quotes here, he said on Nigel Farage, Mr Farage is saying the things he's saying, but he is not offering any long-term solution to the big issues which are consolving gotta get my words out, which led to this. He also says you've just put it somewhere. He says you haven't solved the problem, you just put it somewhere else, and you've done nothing to address the issue of what brings people to this country. Essentially, he says it's an isolationist, short-term knee-jerk when it comes to wanting to deport people. I mean, what do you think?
I'm not surprised you're confused, because it's a confusing thing for a leader of a religion to say. The churches in this country are getting more and more empty by the year, and it's this sort of nonsense is partially to blame for that. They've got this problem, right, where generally, you know, people of faith in this country, people of the Christian faith, will lean more to the conservative side of politics. And yet they've taken on the most liberal left positions imaginable. But if you're someone who really is passionate, who goes to church on Sunday, and you hear this sort of nonsense coming from someone who should be leading your faith, you go, well, this is the one thing that is turning me off. I'll just, you know, I will find my own religious communities, and I will basically follow my faith there. It just doesn't make any sense. And for an organisation that has now been leaderless for 8 months, you think that would be their top priority, fixing that, not going on with this woke nonsense. I find it really frustrating.
No, I do too. Woke Welby was an absolute disgrace, and obviously was found out to be so with his dreadful handling of very serious child exploitation within the Church of England by people that he himself, I think, was or had appointed. Now we've got obviously Cotterill, who himself was with that ugly past. David Tudor, the priest that had serious allegations and was found guilty of sexually abusing minors, as well as being barred from being allowed to be with children of his own, was reappointed to different missionaries in 2013 and 2018. The latter one, I think, being after a £10,000 compensation payment had been made to a victim. He said that he couldn't suspend David Tudor unless he got new investigations. Well, within a year, he did suspend David Tudor because of new allegations that were made against him. And in fact, the Bishop of Newcastle called for his own resignation after Justin Welby, saying that he lacked, and I quote, moral authority. This is not someone that you would argue should be leading the way. Now, after the break, ladies and gentlemen, Angela Rayner is at the centre of a new hypocrisy storm after it emerged that her boyfriend Sam Tarry works for a lobby group whose client got £280,000 cash boost from the Labour government, in fact, from her own department. What do we think of Angela Rayner? You tell me after the break. 0344 499 1000 is how you call, WhatsApp and voice note. Text the word TALK to 87222 and follow our messages on X at talkTV. We'll see you soon.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the incredible Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk, and we've been having a great show. We've been talking about the Epping Hotel and the dreadful decision to overturn that High Court injunction, meaning the 138 illegal migrant males get to remain, and they've been thanking Sir Keir Starmer this morning. We've also then been talking about Zia Yusuf and Reform UK. Can they deliver on the promises that they made? Do they need better people around them in order to deliver? Is it time for Dominic Cummings and Nigel Farage to do a deal, as well as the Church of England, shock horror, can't stay out of politics, rather than focusing on spreading the word of the Lord, rather than focusing on the fact that this natural phenomenon that's taken place where young people, more and more, particularly men, have been turning back to Jesus and Christ, and good on them, it's been happening without the leadership of the Church of England. Rather than doubling down on that and building up their congregations, which is what's been sorely needed for so long, they've decided to swipe at Nigel Farage, calling him an isolationist with short-term knee-jerk ideas to tackle illegal migration, lo and behold. And now we go to another big story. It's an exclusive on the front page of The Sun on Sunday. Big well done there to Kate Ferguson and her team, political editor for The Sun on Sunday, which is Angela Rayner is in another scandal. Here we go. Sam Tarry, who's the partner of Angela Rayner and an ex-Labour MP, works for a lobbying firm, Henham Strategy. They have a client called Great South West, which reportedly received £280,000 grant from Angela Rayner's own department. Now, there is, and I want to be clear, no suggestion of any illegal activity nor any wrongdoing. But it does raise questions when Angela Rayner herself has vocally attacked lobbying and promised tough rules on ex-MPs being able to influence government. I mean, Will, as a lobbyist, couldn't have a better situation than literally living with the Deputy Prime Minister, could you?
Well, that's true, and we will get to that, but I've got to throw you under the bus for my own amusement. This is Steve on Twitter. Go on, Will. Ask Jonathan about his Angela Love Fest yesterday. What's with the Love Fest, Jonathan?
Well, look, I made the mistake clear with some listeners of saying that Angela Rayner, as a person, the person I know, has always been very good fun. I think she passes the sniff test when it comes to, do you want a politician who's authentic? The most authentic one we think about in mainstream politics now is Nigel Farage. In terms of, can you imagine having a pint down the pub and a conversation? Well, with Nigel Farage, of course you can. I think Angela Rayner is second to that.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, but I also think that's why these charges of hypocrisy could be very dangerous for her political brand, because she does do the whole working class girl made good thing. And you hear about, you know, three houses, and look, I've got no problem with the three houses thing. Good on her. But the fact that then she is making, you know, she's made part of her political career about tax evasion and then does all of these shifty legal, but sorry, let me get this right. Legal, but political legal manoeuvres.
Very good tax advisors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. To avoid stamp duty. It goes against that brand that you've just been talking about, and I think that could be dangerous for her. I think the other thing which is interesting about this whole story is, and I'm talking about the stamp duty thing as opposed to the lobbying thing for now, is it just goes to show that all of these attacks on wealthy people that the Labor Party are trying to instigate or are considering, like a wealth tax, for example, ultimately won't hit the super rich because they've got these cunning lawyers and accountants who can weasel their way out of this stuff. It's ultimately the people in the middle who get hit by these sorts of attacks on wealth, and I think this is another really salient example of that.
No, totally, and look, I totally agree with you about the charge of hypocrisy. You can't be going around with your renters' right bill that's going to make lives even more miserable for landlords, meaning more properties off the market, and at the same time, literally take a property off the market, particularly in a seaside resort. Angela Rayner and Labour said it's disgusting that people are buying up Devon and Cornwall, which prices local people out the market. These houses sit empty. It is unfair that she's called for big, large tax rises on second home ownership. And as you say, whilst everything that she's done is legal, right, how many other people would be able to afford, as the Daily Mail is saying on their front page today, Glenn Owen there, top political editor, Rayner uses top wealth protection firm in deal over house. It just goes to the fact that, again, like you say, do as I say not as I do.
How, this is a question, you know, from your experience in politics, how common is this sort of stuff? You know, the husband or the wife may have a connection with a lobbying firm who may have a client. How common is these sorts of webs of influence around Westminster?
It's probably more prevalent now. I mean, particularly a lot of Labour MPs who actually work for lobbying firms who have now got elected. And obviously, look, lobbying firms have a place. They're there to help their clients. Their voice is heard. And, you know, as long as it's done within the rules, there's no that relationship can't be done in a professional manner. But of course, you know, I think the days though when lots of ex-MPs went out the door and went into a lobbying firm, I don't think is anywhere near as common. In fact, what I found personally is ex-MPs are quite tainted. So I think they actually like to avoid them personally. But I think it does raise very legitimate questions for her to answer. What's her main residence? What's her council tax situation? How do we know that the relationship is definitely kept separate in terms of her personal and professional life, as well as Sam's in his professional and personal life too, so that everything is above board. People have to have trust that the system is working for them and not for the wealthy few.
Yeah, well, look, I think unfortunately that trust went a long time ago, but I think she'll probably get away with this from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
The bigger question is around how this impacts her brand, because, again, not amongst the listeners of talkTV, but certainly amongst the Labor, incredibly popular, and that could be jeopardized. They see that she, you know, is potentially just another, you know, member of the Westminster elite.
Well, we've got to go to a quick break. Dean, my producer, is crossing me because I'm squeezing time for the last segment before the main break, so we're going to a break right now.
Hearing yet. We get to see how it progresses and what that appeal might mean for the future. But I mean, the fact the government is allowed to appeal, that could have, if that wasn't the case, then it would effectively tear apart the whole hotel system and leave the whole asylum hotel system in tatters.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, and we're going to be doing a story that we plan to do at the next segment because of the time limit. So what we'll do is instead read out your texts and your tweets, and we've been having those tweets indeed. We've had people here tweeting in. Jane, more Will on talkTV, please. Well, there you go, Will. Good endorsement there. Yeah, illegal celebrating the... Worth it. Yeah, exactly. Well, illegal celebrating the Epping verdict says it all about the current state of this country, a real extraction of urine. Well, not holding back at this time in the morning. Yep. Susan's also saying, a great show so far. Enjoy listening to you both. Have to say I could listen to Will Kingston for hours. Love his accent. It's a love in here this morning for Will. Soph has also tweeted, morning, Jonathan and Will. This is all I have to say about Rayner and Labour in general. This is a quote. The creatures outside look from pig to man and from man to pig and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. A quote from George Orwell's Animal Farm. Yeah. Indeed. So I think people making it abundantly clear what they think about Angela Rayner there. Text coming here from Barry in North Yorkshire. Jonathan, even Starmer tried to get rid of Rayner, although he ended up promoting her. That's true, he gave her, I think, 4 job titles at the end. She is a disgrace and totally unfit for office. I am sick of it. Jonathan, I think you had too many with the boys in the pub last night. Obviously, when I said some nice things there about Angela Rayner, I'm assuming, Tim, I'm sorry to tell you, I'm a teetotaler, so I don't have. If I have some 0%, maybe, but no. As Sean here, if Rayner went to university, she would major in rank hypocrisy. I've never seen a politician with their snout deeper in the trough than her. Sean from Bridlington there. Another one here. Enjoyed your show this weekend. Your guest, Will Kingston, is brilliant. Keep up the great work. Sue from Essex. Thank you so much for your kind words there. Another one here. Why does it take an Aussie guy to sum up perfectly our position in the world, past and present, when our own politicians are wringing their hands? Frustrating. That's from Brian in Sunderland. I mean, Will, what is the what's it like as someone, like you say, who's not British born and bred, but living in this country? It must be quite weird to you to be the one who's like, why is it it's taken me to say what many people are thinking, and so many politicians just simply don't want to listen to it?
Well, because I chose to come here, like, you know, British citizens were born here, it is their home. I chose to come here because I love this country, absolutely love this country. I've got Churchill as the background to my phone. I love the history, I love the values. And so it hurts me, you know, again, I can't imagine how much it must hurt a patriotic Englishman or woman or you know, Scot or Welshman or woman for that matter. But it hurts me as well as someone who is an Anglophile who has a deep love and admiration for this country, seeing what is happening. But the other thing which I would say is so many of the challenges that the United Kingdom faces, Australia is facing as well, but just on a 3 to 4 year lag. So I can see the challenges around illegal immigration, which luckily Australia has solved. But the mass migration challenge, Australia has actually taken more migrants over the last 3 or 4 years than the United Kingdom has. And don't forget, Australia has a third of the population, a bit, or maybe, yeah, give or take, a third of the population. So the mass migration thing is actually being felt more in Australia than it is in the United Kingdom. You look at debt, the debt levels in Australia are increasing like the UK. You look at problems around productivity and stagnant growth, same in Australia. So in some respects, we're all in this together because we've had the same challenges and the same weak responses from politicians for the last 20 years.
And rather pandering to the European Union rather than pandering to the UN, wouldn't it just be nice if, like, Commonwealth countries, for example, came together where they have a shared identity in some sense, shared values, shared aspiration for their people, and maybe if we all work together, we'd be able to actually solve some of these serious long-term problems. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to tell you that Will Kingston will be joining me in the studio after this break for the next hour too, where we go through more of those front page stories. We'll be looking through the front pages of the Sunday newspapers and getting Will and Mai's reaction, as well as reading out your great text. So you know what to do. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk to 87222 if you want to text us, or message and follow us on X at talkTV. We will see you after the break. Take care and get your brew.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People smuggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, he's literally... All he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically it's impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You
It's
just can't
crap.
say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels, and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling guns.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. It's 7:02. It is the early morning, I know, but blimey, what a load of news we have to share with you, as well as a load of views, and we want you taking part in the show. And this is how you do it. 0344 499 1000. That's how you can call us, WhatsApp us, and I love a voice note, so get those voice notes in too. You can also text the word TALK to 87222 with your message following on afterwards, and you can also message and follow us on X at talkTV. We've been going through the big stories of the week. Number one, obviously, the Epping hotel situation. Once again, the British people's interests put second to those human rights of illegal migrants. Another appalling situation we find ourselves in. We've got Zia Youssef saying that Reform UK is going to be like Trump 2.0. They're going to be big, they're going to be bold, they're going to be radical, but do they have enough of a talent pool around them to actually deliver on those promises? And will they stick to them? Because if they don't, then really that will be a failure of democracy, I fear, overall. Then we also have, guess what, the Church of England, the Bishop of York, the most senior now member of the clergy in the Church of England, wading in and criticising Nigel Farage for what he calls a knee-jerk response to tackling illegal migration, saying that it's not a serious solution to have mass deportations. Well, Bishop of York, why not focus on the actual day job, convincing people to turn to Christ, to love God, to spread the word of the Lord amongst the land, and to make Britain Christian once again? You're, by the way, behind the curve, because lots of particularly young people, but young men, are already choosing to do that of their own fruition. So how about you go and spend some time understanding why that is and embrace it, rather than what you'll probably do, which is blame some sort of white privilege or something for it instead, and want to give more money away in ridiculous reparation payments. So there is loads more to go through. I'm delighted the host of the Fire at Will podcast, political commentator extraordinaire, Mr. Will Kingston, is in the studio. And blimey, the love in Will is coming in for you, as we've seen on the WhatsApp and on the text, and rightly so. But that last story where we were talking about Angela Rayner, more people texting in. Maggie from London, the USA has JD Vance. We have Angela. And a face palm emoji there. I mean, hilarious to see that. Angela Rayner, of course, in a bit of hot bother. We'll see that on the front pages. But I want to go this interesting front page, first of all, on the Daily Sunday Express. It says here, most Britons would refuse to fight for its country. 2 in 3 adults would not fight for Britain if we came under attack, a shocking study has revealed. The research conducted exclusively for the Express found 64% of those asked said they were not willing to fight in defence of the country in the event of war, with a further 6% saying they were unsure if they would. The figures showed that in every age bracket, the majority of respondents said they would be, quote, not very willing. I mean, Will, what do you think's leading to that? Is that quite a serious concern? Because I'll be honest, I would see it as a moral duty for my nation, for the community that I wish to serve, to protect, especially coming from a very proud militaristic family. In fact, my great-great-uncle, only a year ago, was a D-Day veteran who sadly passed away. My grandfather was a Marine in 4-2 and served this nation. I myself wanted to be on the front line and serve. Due to being deaf in one ear, was unable to pass the medical despite an attempt to fluff my way through that. I mean, it's very concerning. Is that just because, sadly, this just feeds into the fact that people have been made to not feel the love for this country? Or is it a failure of leadership to cajole a sense of national morale and importance?
It's leadership. It's 25 years of treasonous governments is the short answer. When you as a people feel like the government isn't working for you, why should I work for them? Now, to your point, if you were to fight, you wouldn't be fighting for Keir Starmer, you wouldn't be fighting for Angela Rayner, you'd be fighting for, you know, the history and the values and what this country stands for. But a lot of people now, and I have complete sympathy with them, can't divorce that from the fact that, well, you know, if the government isn't putting me first, or, sorry, my country first, you know, if they're putting international human rights law, if they're putting the climate all of these other things before the people of the United States, my family, my community, why should I put my life on the line for them? Now, yeah, it's an incredibly sad situation, but I can see why you would answer no to this survey.
And it actually builds interestingly off a story that we've seen. Barry Davis, who's a veteran BBC commentator on such things as, for example, Match of the Day and other World Cups and Euros, has said that he warns, and I quote him here, "We won't recognise what is English quite soon," expressing anxiety about national identity and cultural change. He says that we should bring back national service, saying it did him, and I quote, "a world of good." He himself completed national service in the British Army of the Rhine and began broadcasting with British Forces Radio during that time. I mean, we saw Rishi Sunak kind of put that out there in the last year's general election manifesto. People like me were very proud to defend that. I think it's a very good thing. But, Will, I think you might have a fair challenge as to why people are very sceptical about politicians pushing.
Yeah, a couple of things. If you want to say, make this part of a school, if you want 15 or 16-year-olds to do a certain amount of community service or cadets as opposed to the army, all for it, because we make decisions on behalf of children all the time. I have a problem with forcing adults to do things that they don't want to do. You know, I'm probably a bit more libertarian in my leanings, and I also have a problem with adults who didn't have to do something like this themselves, forcing other adults. And let's not forget, this wouldn't be kids, this would be 18-year-old adults to do something. I think there is a real problem with a lack of patriotism as a result of some of the things I just mentioned. I can see the benefits of it, but I think this feeds into the notion of just increasingly the government telling the people what to do. I know I'm probably at odds with most of the listeners and viewers here, but ultimately I believe in freedom.
No, the cadets, for example, I think is a shame that we don't see that anywhere near enough in state schools across the country. And actually, that is the decision of government to not properly invest. Why should it be the luxury of those who go to private school? No condemnation of those. Yeah. Private school, you pay the fees, guess what? You should have the additional luxuries that come with that, because you're choosing to use your disposable income after your taxable income has gone to fund a state school place to give every child opportunity that you want. But I would love to see that rolled out in state schools, because I think it would teach a good bit of discipline. I think, like you say, there should be some element of community service involved in that too, to actually teach people to respect their neighbours, to respect their community, to respect the uniform that they wear at school, when we see time and time again more and more young people sadly being expelled from school, behaviours running in an untoward way, particularly in London. We see knife crime, for example.
Yeah, I think that would be a really great idea. I did, I think, 2-3 years of cadets when I was at school. Unfortunately, I was that kid who always marched with my arms and my legs going at the same time, not in the opposite direction. So I didn't really have the coordination for the marching side of things. But it's certainly, I think, is a really good teacher for discipline and for teamwork and all those sorts of good things, which I think is perhaps lacking. I was about to say amongst the younger generation, but I don't think that's fair across all generations.
Well, listeners, tell us, do you think it's time for national service to come back? Are you happy to hear Barry Davis say that it's important because we need to regain a sense of Englishness and our pride in our community? Or do you think that this is something that shouldn't happen because ultimately why should my children, why should my son, my daughter be put and forced, actually, let's be honest, if it was national service and conscripted, into something that ultimately, into a country that I just don't think has their interests at heart? Now we see Kane Badenoch grabbing herself a front page splash here. She is saying that drill the North Sea dry in a speech that we're expecting her to make. She is making quite an extraordinary bold statement here where she says that Conservatives will overhaul the North Sea Transition Authority. She's first of all going to delete its entire mandate and replace it with a single instruction to maximise the extraction of our oil and gas. She also wants to delete the word transition from the body's title, which was added by Boris Johnson in 2022. Currently, this body imposes burdens on energy companies such as requiring them, and this is oil and gas platforms, hilariously, to switch to electric and reduce their emissions. We know that gas imports are up 19% this year. Domestic production is down 20% this year compared with pre-COVID levels, and despite Labour saying they'll cut bills by £300, they're actually gone up 4 times, around £185 more on your household energy bill. And the last one, only this week, was solely down because despite wholesale gas prices down below, I think, years what they have been before, it was actually the cost of transitional, the renewables obligations and green gas levy contribution actually means that that's why our bills are going up. I mean, I'm sure it'll be welcome, but is this enough to regain trust for the Conservatives with the electorate?
No, it's not enough, but it is welcome news. Real. Net zero national economic suicide is the foundation of growth. If you look at anyone, if you want to Google now, anyone listening, the difference between American and UK energy prices and electricity prices, it is staggering. And it's because Trump has decided to ditch the whole net zero thing and utilise their natural energy resources. The concern that I have for the Conservatives is that they could just get stuck in the middle between left-wing, loony, net zero fanatic Labor, led by Miliband, and Reform, who have been doing the whole net drill, baby drill routine for a while now. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they've fully ditched net zero. I think they've just ditched the timeline element.
Yes, I think Kemi's come out and said 2050 is for the birds, it's unachievable, but still the net zero overall ambition is still there, albeit very cleverly crafted in the press release to avoid pointing that out.
Yeah, so if you've got Farage saying it's a nonsense, Reform's going to ditch it entirely, if you've got Labor saying we love net zero, so that'll pick up the lefty loony vote, why would you pick the one that's in the middle, kind of having a bob each way? That's the problem for the Conservatives on environment policy. To be honest, that's the problem for the Conservatives politically more generally.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, many people saying, for example, as we said earlier, that Nigel Farage press conference this week on their mass deportation plans is actually just preempting what some expect Kemi Badenoch to come out with at Conservative Party Conference. But the question again being, Kemi might say the Conservatives' position is to leave the ECHR, but will she leave the UN Refugee Convention? Will she scrap the Human Rights Act, or will it be a carve-out, which again, carving out elements of law, we know that leads to further judicial reviews and contradictions.
And this is the problem for Kemi. I've got some admiration for how she's saying, I want to make evidence-based decisions, I want to be considered, I want to be deliberate, I'm not going to make knee-jerk policy. In a different political world, I think that's incredibly admirable. I don't think, Kemi, you've got the time for that when you've got a new incumbent challenger party in the... And we can't even say they're a challenger party now. They're smashing them in the polls. Party time for that. She needs to nail the colours to the mast incredibly quickly, or Reform are just going to swamp the Conservatives. Well, more than they already are.
And out of interest, with the obviously ditching there of the transition from this title, something that Boris Johnson inserted, There are some Conservatives out there who believe Boris Johnson is the saviour, that Boris Johnson's got the personality and the likeability to mean the Conservatives can at the very least be the second largest party still at the next election, that Nigel Farage fears him more than most. But I suppose there'll be plenty of people out there saying, well, Nigel Farage will be pointing out Boris Johnson's obsession with net zero, the Boris wave, as it's now become known when it comes to legal migration, obviously the failure to tackle illegal migration during the Conservatives' time in office, of which Boris Johnson was there as Prime Minister for part of, and certainly when it began, and of course has been dubbed woke on many things. For example, when it comes to having, I think, been to Stonewall events with Carrie regarding trans rights.
So two things. Number one, we should all be incredibly grateful for what Boris Johnson did with respect to Brexit. Number two, he does have a rare political talent, and he is one of the great political entertainers of our time. That being said, I would rather cut off my arm with a blunt knife than see him return as the leader of the Conservative Party, because he's not a Conservative. And this has been the problem that the Conservatives have had now for 15, 20 years. They had these faux, Lib Dem, wet, pretend Conservatives who have been in senior positions in their party. He was the one who was behind, or leading light in the net zero movement on the right side of politics. He was the one who engendered the greatest political catastrophe in modern history, being the Boris wave. I don't think, when the big issue of our time is immigration, and you were responsible for opening the floodgates in a way that I don't think any country, maybe with the exception of Germany at one point, but pretty much no country has seen in modern history with the Boris wave. How can that be possible? How can you have a leader who is trying to sell a new message? Same time, he does still have a huge amount of support, but I think he is the wrong man for the moment.
Well, I tend to agree with you on that. Whilst there's lots of things I like and admire about Boris Johnson, as you say, without him, that Brexit wouldn't have actually finally been delivered. I don't think the referendum would have even been won without Boris Johnson and Michael Gove teaming up there to lead the charge for it. And whilst I suppose my frustration is having been a Member of Parliament under Boris Johnson, elected under Boris Johnson, I'm not daft enough to think Jonathan Gullis got loads of votes in Stone North. They voted for Boris Johnson. They voted to get Brexit done. They also voted against Jeremy Corbyn. But my frustration is you had that 80-seat majority. You came in with the ability to really tear up the establishment, which was what Brexit was always about, tearing up the Blairism, Cameronism that has plagued society for so long. He voted for change in 2016 and thought he would deliver that, and it was so sad to see what was a very wasted opportunity.
A question on that. I know that Johnson had to deal with COVID, and that it obviously took up most of the political capital of that period. I get that. That's understandable. Still, let's put that to one side. Why do you think that Johnson and the Conservatives of that period were unable to take that enormous result and actually implement the type of change that you've just referred to?
The biggest issue I think that we had was we were such a broad church politically, in a sense of I don't think there had been enough proper vetting of the candidates that were selected, and there were lots of seats where we won which we didn't expect to win. That meant we had people from such a breadth politically. As you say, as actually Robert Jenrick has said relentlessly, it was a broad church with no central religion. I think Boris Johnson himself failed to properly define things like what does levelling up mean, what's a Conservative vision of levelling up. Now, I've got no issue with the Conservatives saying that will mean a bit more state spending in places where the free market hasn't shown up, to try and generate the free market into picking up the gauntlet and revitalising communities in places like Stoke. But at the same time, I think it was constantly just falling into the trap that many politicians now fall into, which is how to tackle the 24-hour media news cycle, how to try and keep the broad coalition together without realising at some stage you're going to have to upset someone. Which wing of the electorate are you willing to pivot to? Which one are you probably going to lose anyway? And I've told him time and again, the one nation wets in the Conservative Party, those people, because of Brexit alone, with Boris Johnson alone being leader too, were always going to go Liberal Democrat, Green, Labour under a Blairite kind of Labour leader, which Keir Starmer certainly portrayed himself to be.
Yeah, so in Australia, I grew up believing that the broad church on the right side of politics was the only way for a right-wing political party to operate. The mixture of classical liberals and social conservatives. John Howard, the great Australian Prime Minister of the 90s, he was a strong proponent of the broad church. But here's the thing with the broad church, from what I can see in Australia, and I think this would be the case in the UK, you need to have someone from the Conservative wing, a strong Conservative member, who is running the broad church. The broad church never works if you've got one of the classical liberal, more socially progressive types who is at the pulpit. So if they are to do that, you need to have someone on the right. But I also am probably coming to the view now at this time in the world, the broad church just doesn't work anymore.
I don't think it does.
I think probably now we are more fractured. You probably need to have a more conservative, in the truest sense of the word, political party.
And like you say, I've got a lot of admiration for Kane Badenoch. I think she is actually a Conservative. I think she represents the Conservative wing of the Conservative Party. The problem she's got is, if she comes out at a party conference and says she wants to leave the ECHR, James Cleverly, who she's put back in the shadow cabinet, is so clearly on the record as saying we should not leave the ECHR. In fact, that was his mantra in his leadership contest. Hall, another backbench Conservative MP who would never, ever put on a leaflet he wants to leave the ECHR. So my problem is, these people might be willing to say it to survive an election. But as we saw post-Brexit, which many of them sucked up, many of those Conservative MPs that had been there before didn't really want Brexit to be delivered. But when they came back and were surrounded by lots of newbies like me who were very pro-Brexit, they kind of grumbled and moaned relentlessly in the tea rooms, I can tell you that. And sort of it was always about putting us back in our place, and it was always about how to water things down. And like you say, the problem is Boris Johnson was too willing to pander to certain voices to try and keep everyone happy, and you can't keep people happy. And actually what he should have done during his term in office is what he did prior to that election in 2019. Get on board or I'll kick you out the Tory party. And watch how many people, when you're told you're going to be an independent MP, you won't be running as a Conservative next election, which means you won't still be an MP, watch how many of them, when you tell them they'll lose their 95 grand a year job and all the benefits of that, they'll suddenly come back and go, oh OK, I'll toe the line this time.
Yeah, interesting. James, such a good example here. I think, you know, Kemi came out 6 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that, and did the big, you know, we're going to ditch at least the timeline around net zero. And 2 days later, he comes out in an interview for, I think, The Telegraph, saying, no, we should still do net zero. He was obviously so out of touch with the mood of the moment, but she still promoted him recently. And I don't think she would have wanted to promote him. She would have promoted him because there are so many MPs that are still in the Conservative Party who are that sort of wet Lib Dem in disguise type of Conservative. So I don't envy her, because she obviously did that to try and keep them happy whilst she's trying to pull the party towards where it should be as an actual Conservative Party. But this is the fundamental problem that the Conservatives have at the moment.
Oh, there we go. And we've had texts coming in here. Blimey, lots of you talking about what's been saying. Steve from Cambridge. I agree with Will. 25 years of high tax government and the invasion of the silent enemy taking over our councils and power. Jobs fight for what when it comes to this idea about why would anyone want to be on the front line. Another one, lovely to wake up to two handsome men on a Sunday. Stephanie, you are kidding me if you think I'm handsome. But I will definitely, oh, Dean, my producer in my ear, thinks they're talking about him. We'll have to get him on camera towards the end, but certainly about Will.
Yeah, I am single, by the way. If you want to get my mobile number in the strap line, I'm open to office.
My single neighbour mum has homeschooled two lads, polite, courteous, intelligent. Both went to cadets and completed Duke of Edinburgh Gold Awards. I actually am a big fan of the Duke of Edinburgh scheme. I think that's, again, something that should be much more mandatory within the school curriculum. One now studying biochemistry in uni, the other at Sandhurst. Best preparation for life. All four cadets totally agree with Will there. Well said. Another one. If national service comes back, what happens with immigrants? Do refugees get drafted too? And what about those here illegally? Are we training everyone or just British citizens? Very fair comments.
Well, I've got a thought on that. I don't necessarily have a problem with national service for immigrants who are wishing to enter the country as a way to prove that, you know, you're someone who is aligned with the values, to prove that you really want it. You know, I think that, and I say this as an immigrant, I think that would be a very interesting way to naturally solve the mass migration problem.
It would actually be a fascinating idea if someone proposed that. And so you think, for UK, maybe that Kemi Badenoch, she's bold enough, I think, to actually say those ideas?
If you did a year of national service, and then we say, OK, if you do that year of national service, we'll give you a visa, that would be a very interesting little experiment.
Indeed. But another one here, Sarah in London. My kids can do national service only after every member of Parliament has been sent away. They are the ones who need lessons in honour, discipline, decency and patriotism, and they need to learn what serving your country means more than anyone else. Sarah, I think that text right there sums up perfectly the mood and goes to Will's point about it's quite ironic that we have people who maybe want to do this but yet have not done it themselves. Well, after the break, we'll be talking about Starmer's votes for 16-year-olds would give a boost to Corbyn's new party. Is this going to bite Sir Keir Starmer on the backside? Do you think we should have vote 16? Well, 0344 499 1000 is how you text us. Sorry, WhatsApp us, voice note us and call us. You can text us by texting 87222, the word talk at the starting message, and you can follow us and message on X at talkTV. We'll see you soon.
who effectively told us they are scared for their children's safety in the area, and they are worried about what the next steps are and what's going to happen. Obviously, we don't quite know the ramifications of today's hearing yet. We get to see how it progresses and what that appeal might mean for the future. But I mean, the fact the government is allowed to appeal, that could have, if that wasn't the case, then it would effectively tear apart the whole hotel system and leave the whole asylum hotel system in tatters.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. And we're delighted to have Mr. Will Kingston, host of the Fire at Will podcast, still in the studio with me. We go to the extraordinary story that we have on the front page of the Sunday Times. One, I must admit, has made me tickle with laughter. It says, Starmer's votes for 16-year-olds would give a boost to Corbyn's new party. A new poll of 16 and 17-year-olds suggests Jeremy Corbyn's fledgling left-wing party, your party as it's currently known, would split the teenage vote if votes at 16 are in place for the next general election. In a head-to-head, it said Labour would get 24%, amazingly Reform UK on 23%, Corbyn's party on 21%, creating an effective three-way race. If Corbyn's party does become a thing, the Greens would go from 14% down to 6%. That's where obviously they're picking up heavily for Corbyn. The survey by More in Common for the Sunday Times found that 59% of teens support lowering the voting age, but only 46% feel informed enough to vote. Well, there's a shock there. There is an interesting gender split. Teenage boys lean more to right-leaning parties than girls, and on issues, many teens are disenchanted with mainstream parties. Sizable shares back Palestine in the Gaza conflict and would choose Remain in a hypothetical Brexit redo. I mean, Will, this was obviously some big ploy from Labour to think, how can they try and gerrymander the public into keeping themselves in power? It's going to bite them on the backside, isn't it?
Yeah, Nigel Farage must be reading this and laughing his head off, because keep in mind that this new Corbyn party is a gift for reform, because they're never going to get into power anywhere near it. But they will take votes away from Labor, which ultimately will help reform. And the other thing, which again, that the statistics you called out, which is fascinating, which we're seeing across the Western world, we saw it in the US with Trump, young people are turning to these sorts of right-wing populist parties in a way that we haven't seen in modern history. You know, the fact that someone like Farage has more TikTok followers than every other politician in the UK combined, or a member of Parliament combined, is extraordinary. So yeah, this is not something to be concerned about if you're reformed by any means.
What do you think's driving that out of interest, Will? Why are so many more young people looking, as you say, at the right-wing populist parties? And obviously there would be an argument it's predominantly young men. Some people lazily will try and say this is the Andrew Tate phenomenon and sort of brand all these young men misogynist. I'm sick to the back teeth when I hear that nonsense, because well done for demonising young men, which is why young men turn towards the likes of Andrew Tate, because you're so busy saying that they're all predators, they're all problems, they all should be apologising, they should all be feminising themselves. There's nothing wrong with being a man, there's nothing wrong with masculinity, there's nothing wrong with men wanting to hold traditional roles within the households. No one's denying a woman should be able to go to work, no one's denying a woman should be able to be paid equally to man if they're doing the exact same job. No one's denying that a woman can go on to be a great sports athlete. I've got a son and a daughter, I hope both of them achieve and succeed, but I'll certainly be teaching my son there's nothing wrong with being a strong male figure.
Yeah, well said. To answer the question, since the days of the cavemen, young people have wanted to rebel. That's what being young is all about. They've been against the establishment. They've been countercultural. And for most of, for the 20th century at least, if not earlier, the left has owned that space. You know, you were, if you were on the left, you were railing against the man. You know, you were one of the hippies in the 60s. But here's the thing. The left are now the establishment. Every trendy left-wing progressive cause, you know, on identity politics, on, you know, all the race stuff, the gender stuff, that is now embraced by the corporates, the politicians, the media class, with some notable exceptions like talkTV. And so, as a result of that, if you want to be rebellious, you are now on the right. You are now, you know, at least the populist right, you are now on the right. It's a fascinating shift. You know, someone like a Trump or a Farage is now are now the cool kids, and the Keir Starmers, quite obviously, are the squares.
Do you think with people like Nigel Farage, as you say, that incredible statistic that Nigel Farage has more TikTok followers than every MP combined, do you think it goes back to this idea again of Nigel Farage is, at the very least, authentic. He is who he is. He doesn't read from some pre-prepared script. He is willing to speak off the cuff. He's willing to say things that may be more punchy and therefore attractive. And also, he's willing to take the mick out of himself, right? Some of his TikTok videos, he's not afraid to have a laugh at himself, which so badly lacks in our politicians.
Yeah, you compare that to someone like Keir Starmer, and it's extraordinary, isn't it? And again, it's the same formula that Trump has used. I think one of the great underestimated talents of Trump is that he's really funny. Yes. You know, and Farage, it's, once again, can be very, very funny and very entertaining, which is why, again, like, he's a good TV talent. And so I think that the young people of today are responding to that. And this whole scripted, you know, stick to the message type of politics, which was perfected by Blair and
David Cameron in particular,
and
as well.
David Cameron, has run its course. And unfortunately, someone like Starmer hasn't got the message.
Do you know what I was told by Conservative MPs, just to give you this idea of the script? I was told by Conservative MPs on the One Nation wing of the party, the reason that immigration has become an issue that's so salient with the electorate is because people like me within the Conservative Party at the time were talking about the issue. If we didn't talk about the issue, it wouldn't be an issue. That is how mentally absurd some of my ex-colleagues and even now some current MPs are in the Conservative Party. The idea that you can ignore an issue when actually, as you say, young people want to feel that you've heard them and their voices and their concerns. And in this country, young girls in particular are feeling very scared about undocumented illegal migrant males in hotels walking around their community, when we're seeing weekly reports of very serious allegations from sexual assault to other kinds of arson attacks taking place in our country. And as well for boys, who are sick and tired of being told, particularly white working class boys, despite the fact that they only beat Gypsy Roma community when it comes to educational outcomes, that they have privilege that's inherently unfair on black ethnic minorities, and they should therefore be willing to not have university graduate grants and routes for them if they want to. You know, Stormzy's allowed to give one for black students, fine if he wants to do that with his money, but when it was offered to Cambridge or Oxford, I think it was, for white working class peoples, Oxford and Cambridge turned that down, said we don't want that because that's some sort of recounting this idea of positive discrimination, which is actually just discrimination, just reverse racism. It's absurd. And the idea, again, that we live in a country where white working class boys predominantly have been overlooked, have been ignored, are leading in the statistics for not in education, employment and training, are therefore leading in health outcomes for being some of the worst in our country. High suicide rate in under 40s, the biggest killer of young men. And yet, for so long, it's been fashionable to pander to this DEI woke nonsense agenda.
Yeah, I think that's very powerfully said. And let's get back to that. But to circle back to that point that you were making about your ex-Conservative colleagues, basically saying that it's all about the messaging and the messaging then dictates how people feel. It is this sad reality of modern politics, and I think you're seeing it with Labor particularly now, that politicians think that we're stupid. They think that we're stupid. No, and the reason I was cheekily looking at my phone there is I was trying to pull up a quote I heard the other day from David Starkey in a really good interview with Brendan O'Neill. And he said, "We are run increasingly not by politicians, but by people who regard themselves as superior experts. They look down on us as an old-fashioned, arrogant surgeon did at a stupid patient, somebody to be soft-soaped or brutally experimented upon." And I think that's the way that a lot of politicians on both sides of the political aisle now think about their job. It is not we reflect the will of the people, it is that we tell the people what they should be thinking because we're better than them.
Well, I think you summed up with that quote absolutely bang on the money. And we've had the text coming in here. We've got Jonathan and Will, you should both stand as Reform MPs. What do you both think? We need strong people like you. That's Francis from Sussex. Will, do you fancy a job in frontline politics? Are you happy holding the politicians to account and trying to move the agenda?
Well, I think I'd need to become a citizen first. But if an election was held, I still, I'm not throwing my lot in with Reform. If an election was held tomorrow, I would vote for Reform because I think they are on balance the best option. But we've got to keep in mind there is a long way to go until the next election. A lot can happen, we will see, but let's keep our powder dry on that one for the moment. How about you, mate?
Well, I haven't decided if I want to go back into frontline politics. It's a very bruising experience. I've got a young family, which means I really miss being away from my children. Look, I've said on air before and got told off for saying it by someone within the Conservative Party that I felt politically homeless. I think Reform is certainly saying a lot of the right things. I need to be convinced that professionalisation and is happening and that the manpower is going to be there to actually deliver what they want to do, the detail. The Conservative Party have got a hell of a long way to go, and I think ultimately it comes back to trust. And I look at many of those Conservative MPs, many of whom I worked with and served with. Do I trust they'll do the things that what Kemi's saying? No, I don't. That's not a fault of Kemi. That's a fault of them. And so sadly, I feel that I'm kind of in a space to be convinced by one or the other that they can definitely deliver. But I certainly, with the overall vision of what Reform UK is saying, certainly feel more naturally at home there. But like I say, huge fan of Nigel Farage, know him personally, consider him a good friend, think that the Conservative Party should never have done him dirty, should have made him appear in the House of Lords, should have made him therefore our Home Secretary, something which I got pillaged by colleagues at the time. But as I kept saying, if you want to take the Nigel Farage question off the table, it was about time we brought him back inside the club.
Well, a question on that, and I've asked Alex on this show the same question because she's also very close with Nigel. A lot of people ask who is the real Nigel Farage. I've heard some people say he's an old school Thatcherite. I've heard some people say he is the populist firebrand that that some people present him as. Some people will call him a fascist. Some people, I've heard several different theories for who is the real Nigel Farage. So the question is, who is the real Nigel Farage?
So I think he is naturally a Thatcherite, but I think he's also been on a political journey, and I would say the same as well. I went into politics very much a laissez-faire, small state, low tax Conservative. Then I represent a community like Stoke-on-Trent and see the free market has not turned up to replace the jobs in the ceramics industry that were lost overseas due to globalisation, has not come in to revitalise the life outcomes and chances, despite Labour building lots of new shiny schools, worst education and one of the worst educational outcomes in the country, despite building a shiny new hospital with a whopping PFI debt under the last Labour government, with fewer beds, by the way, worked that one out. Some of the worst health outcomes in the West Midlands, in fact, top of most charts there too. And so I do think there needs to be an element of state interventionism. I look at what Nigel Farage says about the water industry. Again, I don't get to choose who I pay my water bill to. I have to pay Severn Trent. Now, Severn Trent at the same time as borrowing more than they ever have done and whacking up debt, and whilst also at the same time then whacking out massive shareholder dividends higher than ever before, are also whacking up my bill. That doesn't feel like proper free market economics to me. So I think the problem I've got is that I look at the situation and think that I've moved politically, certainly on the economic viewpoint, and what I think what Reform are doing, why Reform does intrigue and excite me in many ways, like listeners will be, is that I do think they come in with a very big breath of fresh air. I think they have the space with the public to be able to go, because we're not tainted by the past, we can be more bold and radical than maybe you would have allowed the other parties to go before, because we're willing to say and do the bold, radical things. And ultimately, I think that the Conservative Party for too long think they have the right to exist. And just because they've been around for 200 years does not mean you have the right to exist. The Liberals thought that before the Labour Party took them out. And I think the Conservative Party is one of the most existential crises of its lifetime. And if it doesn't get itself together, and I certainly think even after next May, if we think what's going to happen in Wales and Scotland, as well as helping in other local elections, I think the Conservative Party could be on the verge of dying.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's interesting you mentioned the old Liberal Party. We are watching at the moment a once-in-a-century political event. You know, for political nerds, I think what the situation the country is facing is pretty dire and serious. But if you're a political nerd, it's exciting times, because you know, we have grown up looking effectively at two-party systems across the West, and we're now in a political reality where this is a five-party system now. You know, the Lib Dems are annoying and useless, but they still electorally are significant. The Conservatives are on the downward slope, but they're still electorally there. Labor, you've got the new Corbyn party that'll eat the Labor Party's lunch. You know, the Greens are an irritant, but they'll still pick up 6 to 7% of the vote
Zach
potentially.
Polansky could, you know, populists on the left could really cause Starmer some problems there as well.
I don't think that we are so we're talking a lot about these different players that I just mentioned, the impact of Reform, the impact of Corbyn. I don't think we're talking enough about the changing overall dynamic of living in a five-party system as opposed to effectively a two-party system. That's an incredibly different political landscape with different strategies and consequences. Really, really fascinating times.
Well, it is a fascinating time indeed. And what do you think? Who do you hold out hope for? Can Labour win you back over? Do you think Sir Keir Starmer just needs to be given more time? Can the Conservatives under Kay Badenoch's leadership offer a refreshing change, maybe doing more of the slamming of the past and then proposing the policies that you wanted to see from a Conservative government? Has Nigel Farage convinced you enough? We've heard the talk, but will the walk follow? Are you convinced that he'll have enough people around him? Or do the Greens and Lib Dems appeal to you? Do you find them intriguing, that they're offering maybe too a fresh alternative voice? Well, you know what to do. 0344 499 1000 is how you WhatsApp, voice note and call us. Text to the word TALK to 87222 with your message to follow after, and message and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Everybody, Jonathan Gullis here, sitting in for Alex Phillips, the amazing host of Weekend Breakfast, and I'm glad to be in the hot seat to make sure that it's kept warm for her return. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for telling us all your views. I will get back to text, but we're going to quickly go with Will Kingston, again, host of the Fire at Will podcast and political commentator, who's still with me in the studio. Blimey, he's been doing a shift today, and all the caffeine's in his system. We're going to go on to Donald Trump stuff, because obviously international stuff is important, and Donald Trump is talking about deploying private army to Ukraine. American private military firms could be deployed to Ukraine as part of a long-term peace plan. Donald Trump is in talks with European allies about allowing armed contractors to help build fortifications to protect American interests in the country. The plan is being devised as a workaround after the US president promised that American troops would not be stationed in Ukraine. US contractors could be deployed to help rebuild Ukraine's frontline defences, new bases and protect US businesses. The presence of private soldiers would act as a deterrent to discourage Vladimir Putin from breaking an eventual ceasefire. I mean, what do you think of this, Will? Quite an interesting idea.
It is an interesting idea. Give me 30 seconds to respond to one thing, because there has been a lot of heat that I've been seeing on social media about my earlier thought bubble around making immigrants do a period of national service before being allowed to enter the country. Some people are saying that I would potentially be arming non-friendlies before they enter the country. That is not what I am suggesting. You know, make them go off and pick fruit for a year or something, or make them do a cadet-style thing. And the point is, I don't think any of them would turn up if they had to do that as a prerequisite. Just get that out of the way before people think that I'm arming foreign insurgents to enter the United Kingdom. On the Trump thing, I think it's an interesting idea. I think foreign mercenaries have been used by great powers for millennia. You know, the Romans, the Persians, you know, they use mercenaries to prop up their armies. If ultimately it leads to, you know, some sort of lasting stability in the region, all good. Trump's obviously doing it as a workaround because he's said that he won't put boots on the ground in Ukraine. You know, I understand that some people may be concerned that, you know, if you have kind of private organisations, there may be less oversight or less accountability. That's something you'd have to look into. But on the whole, yeah, I think it's not a bad idea. What do you think?
It's interestingly, like, some people would say he's taking the Putin playbook. We know that Putin himself uses a lot of mercenary firms to create faux wars in other parts of the world to try and distract the eyes of Western leaders, whilst also at the same time trying to move troops, for example, onto that Ukrainian border, as he did. There's a lot of work, I think, in Africa, for example, that's causing a lot of problems with particularly Russian mercenaries in there. We saw that in Syria as well, where the Russians were certainly helping Assad take on ISIS and other forces there too. I think, look, he obviously has got to deliver to the people that there will be no boots on the ground. That was a very firm commitment, and I think the MAGA movement has been pushed at times to swallow a bit more of their pride than they would like, and I think it would be one step too far for them in some things. You know, we've already seen Tucker Carlson turning quite aggressively on Trump on certain things. Steve Bannon's certainly swinging from the hip too. So I think that they've got to find something, because there will need to be some sort of US security guarantee if Putin's going to take any threat seriously. He will not be deterred by just European leaders manning the front line. He will want to see, if he sees the US troops or mercenaries or on the ground, and obviously US interests in the ground in Ukraine, particularly that minerals deal that was done between President Trump and President Zelensky, I think that will make Putin at the very least pause for thought.
Yeah, I agree. And look, the other thing is, Trump is a disruptor. He doesn't operate through normal political convention, or though he doesn't operate in the way that things have done in the past. This is yet another example of something which, you know, in 10 years ago, 5 years ago, in the old political world, would have been seen as unthinkable. But now Trump's going, well, you know what? If it works, and convention be damned.
Well, there's also this other story here which says that a federal appeals court has ruled that most of Donald Trump's tariffs are an overreach of his use of emergency powers as president. The so-called reciprocal tariffs imposed on nearly every country the US trades with are being illegally imposed, the US Court of Appeal said on Friday. The decision upholds a ruling in May from the Court of International Trade, which also rejected Trump's argument that his global tariffs were permitted under an Emergency Economic Powers Act. Many of the tariffs that would be affected by the ruling stem from an announcement in April of a flat 10% rate on imports from all countries, which Trump said would even out unfair trade relations with the US. I mean, We've seen the judiciary yet again tiptoeing in here. What do you think? I mean, some people would say what Trump's doing is economic madness, and I think there's some legitimate concerns to say that quite reciprocal, you know, you've got to have a bit more nuance in how you do these. I understand him wanting to defend the automobile industry and sell it for steel, by all means, but I think some of the attacking coffee beans, I don't know how many coffee beans are grown in the US, but it has been a bit weird. But at the end of the day, he was elected on a very clear mandate about what he'd do on tariffs. It seems very weird that a court is trying to deter what he was very publicly open about he wanted to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've got mixed feelings on this one because I think the court probably is legally right, and that I don't think this falls under the definition of an emergency as is set out in the Constitution. So I think that's probably the right read. But at the same time, he didn't hide this. He went to an election saying that this was the centrepiece of his economic policy.
His favourite word in the dictionary.
Exactly. He's been saying this for 40 years now. So it is obviously the will of the people for this to be implemented. And, you know, you can make the read that this is, you know, an activist judiciary that is trying to get involved in politics. So it's a tricky one, mixed feelings, but again, you can't say that he tried to sneak this through the back door.
No, absolutely not. And there you go, updates on what you think about Donald Trump. Do you think as president he's got Britain's interests at heart? We know he's got his big state visit due in a moment of weeks now. I'm sure Keir Starmer is looking forward to those headlines and all the photos of him picking up bits of paper that President Trump maybe drops on the floor too. We look forward to seeing that photo beamed across your images time and time again. And guess what? You can tell us 0344 499 1000 what you think by calling, WhatsApping and voice noting. You can text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, and you can also message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, Ryland Clark. He went viral for standing up for common sense in this country and saying that mass illegal migration has concerns. Well, you'll never guess what. The Mirror has decided that Ryland Clark needs fact-checking and is basically, it's time to cancel him. Well, bore them. But let's see what they think is the truth after the break.
who effectively told us they are scared for their children's safety in the area, and they are worried about what the next steps are and what's going to happen. Obviously, we don't quite know the ramifications of today's hearing yet. We get to see how it progresses and what that appeal might mean for the future. But I mean, the fact the government is allowed to appeal, that could have, if that wasn't the case, then it would effectively tear apart the whole hotel system and leave the whole asylum hotel system in tatters.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on talkTV. Let's get straight into this story. The Mirror has decided to fact-check Ryland Clark. Claims about migration after he provoked, as they say, an angry backlash. I didn't see any anger on the social media outlet I was putting out on. I had 4 million views of his quotes on my Facebook page, and blimey, let's just say people were loving what he had to say about small boats crossings. Darren Lewis has said in the Mirror, Ryland Clark needs pushback, but ITV should be ashamed at what was broadcast. Darren, I suspect that you need to get out in the real world. But let's have a look here. Ryland, the host claimed that small boat arrivals are given free phones and iPads. He said the narrative is, here's the hotel, here's the phone, here's the iPad, here's the NHS in reception of the hotel. What is the reality, according to the Mirror? The Home Office does not provide mobile phones and iPads to new arrivals because they are not considered a basic need. But sometimes charities and churches may do so, along with basic items like food, clothes and food, which are not funded by taxpayers. And asylum seekers are entitled to free NHS care while their claims are being processed. Well, let me just say to the Mirror, you could say to those charities to not give iPads and not give phones. You choose not to. So people will be rightly angry when they see illegal migrants walking around the streets. And the fact that you get free NHS care, by the way, it's NHS care that is brought to their front door in the hotel, not queuing for hours on end in A&E or waiting on the phone at 8 a.m. to try and get an emergency GP appointment to find out they're all taken up, right, Will?
Yeah, I despise these fact-checkers at the Mirror, at the BBC, because they are inevitably ways to try and nitpick on people on the right whilst they just let the left get a free pass. Because fact-checking, right, is, you know, it comes down to what facts do you choose to check and what do you not. Like, the broader point he's making here, forget about iPhones, is that we're giving them all manner of things, free accommodation, discounts from councils on activities, food, all that sort of stuff as an incentive to arrive. That's the point he's getting at. And the really interesting one, which is the third fact, in inverted commas, that they checked, Ryland said there is a narrative that, there is a narrative that people are told. Here's 3 meals a day, here's a games room in the hotel, have a lovely time and welcome. Now check out this fact check. They say, the Home Office has a legal duty to provide basic support to destitute asylum seekers whilst their claims are protest. In other words, what you're saying isn't wrong, we just don't like the way that you've said it. What you're saying is exactly right, but, well, the Home Office has a duty to do that. That's not calling out a lie or calling out a mistruth. It's just saying we don't like the impolite way that you put your words together. And the fact of the matter is they would never ever do that if it was a leftist comment or someone from a Labour politician.
Didn't see any fact-checking around what was said around the hate marches on the streets regarding Hamas and Palestine. You never seem to see the fact-checking there from the Mirror, but hey-ho, maybe one day we'll be surprised. Text coming in here. Morning, Jonathan and Will. Nigel Farage is going to be in number 10. I followed Reform since watching Talk and listening to Richard Tice. What he was saying was so refreshing. Go, Nigel. Go Reform. That's Max in Warwickshire. Morning, Jonathan. A lifelong Conservative activist even standing for elections. The Broadchurch has turned into a liberal woke talking shop. It's got to the point I cannot offer my support to them any longer. I had high hopes that Kemi would go in all guns blazing, but she's as soft as marshmallow. To save this country, I may have to vote Reform. That's Mike there texting in. A challenge to me, professionalisation. Comparable to what exactly? Clueless Kemi or Stasi Starmer or the bloke on the space hopper? Do me a favour. Anna in Surrey there, not liking what I'm saying. And Steve from Cambridge, Reform, it's a case of what we have got to lose. We've hit rock bottom politically. That, I think, probably sums up where a lot of people are at.
Yeah, exactly right. I think, you know, I think it's now time where people just want to take a punt. 100%.
Well, listeners and viewers, thank you so much. The incredible Will Kingston, host of the Fire at Will podcast, who's been with me for the last 2 hours. That is a punishment in itself. And thank you so much for joining us on the show. We want to hear your calls, 0344 499 1000, to share your views and your thoughts. Text the word TALK to 87222 and message and follow us on X at TalkTV. After the break, former Special Advisor in the Home Office, James Starkey, is going to be joining me to talk about the big stories from Epping to Zia Yusuf and Nigel Farage's deportation plan. Does he think they will work? He has frontline experience, so let's find out and see for ourselves. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go and get yourself a brew, maybe a bacon butty or sausage sarnie, and join us back after the break. We'll see you soon, and I love you.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People schmiggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... Those... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, when more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You just can't say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And I'm delighted to have you joining us here in the studio from the beautiful, what is currently sort of sunny with a few bit of cloud lined London skyline. We have got lots of great stories to take you through later on today, but you are the most important thing, which is you by texting, calling, WhatsApping and voice noting, and you do that by saying 0344 499 1000 to WhatsApp, voice note and call. 87222 is how you text us with the word talk at the start of your message, and you can follow our message on X at talkTV. We look forward to getting your views, and blimey, are the texts coming in. Angela Rayner, is she a rank hypocrite? Keir Starmer, are you delighted he got thanks for getting the Epping Hotel to stay open to migrant males? Do you think the Bishop of York should be wading in when it comes to legal migration? And do you trust Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage to deliver on mass deportations? Well, an expert when it comes to Home Office policy joins me now down the line. His name is Mr. James Starkey. He's a former special advisor in the Home Office and knows all too well about this. Hello, James. How are you?
Hi, Jonathan. Good morning.
Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us again, James, on the channel. Now, Zia Youssef has come out in a Sunday Times interview talking about how Reform UK is going to deliver on their promises. They're going to, obviously, as I've said before, scrap being the Human Rights Act, leave the ECHR, derogate from the UN Refugee Convention. Interestingly, this article, Harry York has done a very good job pushing on the Good Friday Agreement, which we know is underpinned. Some say by the ECHR. I know from legal advice within the Northern Ireland Office is actually the Human Rights Act, which underpins the Good Friday Agreement. He seems to say they'll be able to do that and not require a referendum in Northern Ireland. I think lots of people would say that's quite fanciful thinking, seeing as how entrenched and divisive any renegotiation will be. He's also defended his term of fighting age males, saying the public are grown up enough to understand what he means, and that some people want retribution from countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq and Syria. Now, James, you actually worked in Iraq for a period of time just after Saddam Hussein fell. So how do you feel when you hear this type of terminology? Do you think it's wrong? Do you think people in places like Iraq want retribution?
I don't know about the term retribution. I mean, I think as you said, I first moved to Iraq in 2003, 2 months after the US or the coalition invasion. I think it is true that there were a lot of genuine refugees from Iraq. I've lived in Iraq for probably 6 years of my life. There's still now today a huge amount of internally displaced people, both Iraqis and from neighbouring countries, for example, particularly Syria, who live in desperate conditions in camps that have been there for years. But it's also true that I met a lot of people who were pretty open with me that they were wanting to come to Europe and the United Kingdom. Germany's also quite a popular place, as we know from the numbers, but there's a large Iraqi community there, that they were economic migrants. And, you know, when you speak to them, their desires are admirable, person to person. You know, they want a better life for themselves. They want to be able to give an education to their children that they wouldn't be able to get domestically. And I think anyone listening, you know, parents particularly, can understand that. But they're not asylum seekers. There's a difference between an economic migrant and an asylum seeker. An economic migrant should be going through the usual visa process.
Absolutely, James. And out of interest, obviously, is here doubling down essentially on Reform's mass deportation plan, albeit interestingly, also with the row back, the walk back that's been described, where Nigel Farage, the day after his press conference, and Zia Youssef backing that up in this Sunday Times interview, saying that women and children will not be deported, that the new UK deportation command, modelled on America's ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, will focus solely on males, predominantly single males. I mean, you've obviously seen the detail yourself. How feasible do you think Reform's plans are? Is there a risk here of marching people up the hill? Will Kingston, political commentator on the show earlier, was saying that it's the people that's dragged Nigel Farage to this position. Actually, Nigel Farage only a year ago was saying it's impossible to have mass deportations and leads people down potentially a dark road. And obviously, he's also said the risk is if people like him fail, then who does that open up the possibility of coming forward politically on the extreme right?
I'm not sure I buy this idea that if Farage fails, the country is just going to turn to the extreme right. We don't have a huge, widespread culture of extremism. You know, we have had times in the past where, for example, the BNP rose, but it's the case that they never managed to get even close to getting an MP. So I'm slightly sceptical of this kind of view that people want to paint, that which is like, oh, if Farage fails, you know, everyone's going to kind of, you know, turn to that side of things. I think in terms of their plans, I think there's a lot of reform plans, there's a lot of holes in them. You know, they, as you said, they kind of seem to walk elements of their plan back within 24 hours. Then, as you say, Farage was challenged that just less than a year ago, he described essentially what is now reform policy as impossible, and so they're not worth trying. And I think, you know, it will be very difficult to do the things that he achieved. So it's less to me whether, oh, he's going to come in and fail and the country's all going to kind of move to some kind of, as left-wing commentators want to portray it, they're going to move to some kind of right-wing nutcases. I don't think it's that. I think it's more they'll see him as a typical politician. And if you look at the polling on the policy since it came out, there's quite significant scepticism with voters on the right. So there's a decent chunk of current Conservative voters who don't believe he'll do it, don't believe he'll be able to do it. And there's a decent chunk of Reform voters, actually, who are sceptical about it. The difference with Farage, though, is I think that people think he'll try to do it, that he wants to do it. And that's the gap that he's playing into, which is I don't think they really believe politicians of other stripes really have the intention to do it. And Farage does at least have that, which is, I imagine if you did a focus group, and, you know, your viewers and listeners will probably want to text in and give their opinions. I'd be interested to know what people watching think, which is, I think they probably think, I'm not sure he'll achieve this, but he'll try to do it, so he'll get closer than other people, other politicians.
I do regularly see people texting and saying, even if he only gets 50% of the way there, that'll be more than maybe they would say the uni party, as they dub it, or Labour and Conservative would be willing to go. As you say, I think there's a lot of people wishing him on. Now, you've been there and seen what it's like within the Home Office, and obviously trying to get legislation through. Will Kingston was saying again earlier that someone like Dominic Cummings is going to have to be required to come and work in a reform-led government if you're going to have any chance of driving quite a radical agenda through. I mean, legally, the hurdles, James, as you say, scrapping the Human Rights Act, replacing that with a British Bill of Rights. We discussed that even last week, that actually you're just replacing the same judicial activism potentially into UK courts. But then also renegotiating the Good Friday Agreement, the judicial reviews over leaving the ECHR, over ignoring the UN Refugee Convention. I mean, again, how easy would it be for Reform to try and somehow carve a legal way through this without just tying themselves up in knots?
I think you've got to separate a couple of things. You mentioned Dominic Cummings. There's the legal aspect, which is, can they get all their ducks in a row? I think that's a big question. Saying, oh, we're going to leave the ECHR, everything's going to be fine. It's not, because they're going to introduce a British Bill of Rights, which will then be interpreted by judges. And I think, as has been pointed out by a number of people, not least Rajiv Shah, who used to be in the MOJ and knows a lot about this stuff and has been on your programme, that the Bill of Rights probably leaves more open interpretation than the current situation. So with regards to the legal footing, I think you could, if they don't bring forward reform, that is, if they were to win power, if they don't bring forward legislation that is clear enough, because if you look at the basics of the ECHR, you're talking about some pretty basic rights, right to a family life. It's used a lot, as we know, by asylum seekers to stop themselves being deported. But when you look domestically, most people would think they do have a right to family life. So how do you legally separate that and get the judges to talk? But then you've got the separate aspect, which is actually getting things working. And so if you speak to people in the Labour government, they're nowhere near as extreme as some of the measures that Reform are talking about, but they're struggling to get the system, the civil service, to work as they intended. And that's when you kind of talk about people like Dominic Cummings, who can Reform get that's actually going to make all this work, because it's a huge system. If it was a business, you'd be talking about, in terms of employee count, probably the biggest business on the FTSE 100, one of the biggest businesses in the world, that is not functioning properly, and you're trying to change. That's not easy.
Well, indeed, and thank you for that, James. Another story in The Sun that's appeared, one that we've probably heard before. Jacob Rees-Mogg is allegedly potentially going to defect to Reform UK. He's obviously made it clear he wants to have a career back on the front line of politics in ideally his North East Somerset and Hanham constituency. He, however, has said in the paper, there is no need to put me on defection watch. There is no need to worry. I mean, if someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg was to go, James, does that give Reform credibility? Is that the type of person that they need? Would it be a hammer blow to the Conservatives, or would it be a case of some people thinking the inevitable's happened?
I think Jacob's quite a big deal. So we've seen a few Tories flip over, and we've seen your own name mentioned. I'll leave viewers to decide how significant they think your defection to would be, and I'll keep my own thoughts private on that for now. But Jacob is one of very few people who has his own following within the Conservative Party. So, if you go to Conservative Party conference, which, I'm not saying, I don't know if swathes of people will necessarily go this year, but if you do go, in previous years, and you go to a Jacob Rees-Mogg event, there will be a lot of people there. And he has his own kind of, I don't know the number, but he has his own specific following. And at a time when Conservatives are struggling to retain members, and the foot soldiers, as you might call them, to go out and deliver leaflets and campaign for them, I think losing someone like Jacob is much bigger than, no offence to some of the people we've seen move recently, but the kind of defections we've seen since the election, maybe apart from Andrea Jenkins, don't really have a kind of specific following within the party. They don't really, unless they take anyone with them, I don't think. Whereas Jacob, I think, does, and would be quite a strong message to a certain group of Conservative members. So it's damaging to the Conservative Party. He's probably more welcomed in Reform, I would imagine, and you know some of those people better, than your average Conservative who's seen as a careerist and hopping over and has caused problems in the Reform membership, that people don't want to be just a place for, and again, no offence to you, Jonathan, kind of has-been former Tory MPs. But so I think Jacob is significant. How much Jacob will do to kind of win some of the people over that they don't currently have, I don't think a great deal, but I do think he's a much bigger defection than we've seen recently.
Well, thank you, James, for those nice personal attacks. Always enjoyed them from you. Lon, final question is that Kemi Badenoch has obviously come out in saying that she's going to disavow, essentially, net zero. She wants to baby drill in the North Sea, drill it dry, essentially. She's also wants to delete the word transition for the North Sea Transition Authority, something that Boris Johnson inserted in 2022. She wants to delete its entire mandate and replace it with a single instruction, maximise the extraction of our oil and gas. Obviously, gas imports up 19% this year, domestic production down 20% with pre-COVID levels, and obviously Labour's had 4 energy bill rises despite promising to cut £300. Is this good news for Kemi Badenoch in trying to win back those voters who have defected to reform or are sat at home?
I think they obviously need... Kemi Badenoch has struggled to cut through since she won last year. And it's a problem that's quite widely discussed in the Conservative Party. They need some things like this to capture headlines. I think that her position on net zero is fairly consistent. She clearly doesn't like anything with the word transition in, so there's consistency there as well. I think I think it's a kind of obvious attack on Labour. Labour are weak on this area. I think the people you have to look at the middle ground. Ed Miliband has a lot of support within the Labour Party, but it's clear the Labour Party commitment to cut bills by £300 by the next election. I don't think many people believe that. And if you look, just this last week, energy bills have gone up by a small amount, 2%, but people feel it, and it's the wrong way. So I think these kinds of things, do work, do cut through. I think that if you speak to Conservatives, they would say we haven't seen enough of them. Yeah. Rather than in and of itself. So, as with everything in life, politics is about consistency and consistently cutting through. So, I think it's a kind of good start. People will say we need to see more of it.
James Stuckey, former special advisor in the Home Office, thank you so much for joining us here on Talk today. We go to my next guest. His name is Sean Custis. I apologise, I very rudely said that incorrectly last week. He's the head of sport for The Sun, taking us a roundup of what's been going on The Sun on the Sunday's sports section.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
As I say, Sean Custis is joining me in the studio now, head of sport for The Sun. Hello, Sean, how are you this morning?
Very good, thanks. Understandably, back pages are dominated by... Ordinarily, this fixture, Man United 3, Burnley 2, big deal. But, of course, we know what pressure Ruben Amorim's under, the Manchester United manager. I'm not sure this has eased it particularly, but he did get a win, which he needed after going out of the Carabao Cup to Grimsby during the week. And to win 97th minute, the relief must have been enormous. You could sense the relief around Old Trafford and from Bruno Fernandes, who scored the winning penalty. Look, they deserved to win it, there's no doubt about it. They absolutely dominated the game. And Scott Parker moaning a bit about the penalty which was given, but I think he should look at his own player, frankly, because he pulled Diallo's shirt and sadly for him got what he deserved. So victory for Man United, but I don't think it eases things for Amorim. As I say, he's got this 2-week international break now, where if he hadn't won over Burnley, we would have been, is he going to get the sack? Yes, is he going to have to walk? But he's going to survive that now, and then he's got Man City and Chelsea coming up straight after the international break, which is going to be pretty tricky for him. I was at Chelsea versus Fulham yesterday, and that, to say the least, was controversial.
I'm a Fulham fan, so I'm very upset to not to lose to a rival, but also in the manner of that defeat, with that VAR decision, which still I haven't recovered from.
I mean, it's very odd. I think football is unanimous in thinking it wasn't a foul in the lead up to that goal. Muniz, who did a brilliant turn and then, ends up treading on Chalobah's foot, but he's sliding in to make the tackle and the foot's just coming down. Releases young Josh King, brilliant run, turn, shot into the corner, fantastic goal. And being there was really weird because it took an age to look at it. And you think, well, if you're going on and on and on and looking at this, there must... Exactly. Just give the goal. And the reaction from the Fulham fans and Marco Silva was understandable. The way it was just good. And it changes the whole dynamic of the game, doesn't it? Because if Fulham are 1-0 up, Chelsea are feeling under pressure to equalise. But once they've got away with that, then they score at the end of the half when Marco Silva says you've given an extra minute in added time when it should have been 8. They ended up getting 9. And then you've got the one in the second half where there's loads of incidents before the winning goal. And to be honest, I felt for him a bit. I thought Fulham were very unlucky there.
Silva's quite punchy, wasn't he, there in the he said, Chelsea spend billions. I don't need VAR and officiating to be against me too.
Absolutely.
Also, a slight dig, I think, about the transfer market for Fulham as well, where we know he's certainly frustrated about the lack of activity.
Yeah, he does want some reinforcements. Every manager wants reinforcements, though, don't they? Look, Fulham punch above their weight. And they deserved better yesterday, and he deserves better, I think, because he's a good manager and he's leading. He wants to get Fulham into Europe, and I think he can if he gets back.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then Spurs-Bournemouth, interesting. Spurs have done really well. Obviously a 1-0 defeat, however, but they did unveil their big new signing, a big money move for them, Xavi Simons, who was rumoured at one stage to be going towards Chelsea.
Going to Chelsea, but he always says, oh, it was only Tottenham, it was the only club for me. And I watched that yesterday and thought, this is what they mean about being Spursy. Get off to a great start, then lose at home to Bournemouth, which you didn't see coming really after the way Spurs had started. But as people have pointed out, this week, Spurs have had a few good starts to the season, then dropped off. They did it. You can think doing it under Nuno Espirito Santo, even, who ended up getting the sack not long afterwards. I think it's a reality check, isn't it, for Spurs fans? Let's put it that way.
And impressive for Bournemouth, who've had a lot of players out the club, a lot of sales and transfers.
They apparently lost the 2 best centre backs in the world. It would seem, losing to who ended up going to Real Madrid and PSG. So. Well done to them. I mean, Iraola's clearly a very talented manager because he gets the best, absolute best out of his players.
And then the big game today, Liverpool versus Arsenal.
Yeah, it's a great rivalry. Liverpool-Arsenal, you would see, despite the fact Man City are hoping to come back, you would see that Liverpool-Arsenal are the 2 main protagonists this season for the title. And Mo Salah's sort of cranking it up a bit more, saying, Arsenal have got it a bit easier. They've had a squad together for all this time. They're all friends. They know exactly how everybody works. We're struggling because we've spent 300 million and haven't integrated properly yet. So we'll take that with a pinch of salt.
Isak, do you think he'll be in a Liverpool shirt before this transfer window ends, or are you just sick and tired of this saga?
No, I'm not sick and tired of it because it's good copy for the papers and for us online and for us to talk about here. I'm a Newcastle fan. Obviously, I would like him to stay. I realise the difficulties in all of that, but if Liverpool don't come back with another bid and Newcastle accept the first bid, I'll be really annoyed because I think we've dug our heels in and we've said this is the fee. You can't have him if you don't pay it. I'd be really amusing if Isak is still there on September the 2nd.
Well, let's see what goes. Thank you so much. Sean Custis, their head of sport for The Sun, taking us through the back pages for The Sun on Sunday.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
Thank you so much there again to Sean Custis from The Sun, taking us through the sports section. We'll be back with you after the break.
extremely let down, feel let down every angle we turn. You know, obviously let down by the government, they're not listening to the British people, we feel very much second-class citizens in our own country. Let down locally by the Conservative-led Epping Forest District Council. You know, actually, it's their inaction and their many errors that has allowed this not to happen. Why? I said before on one of your shows, why has it taken them till August?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Good morning. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk, and we now go to our head-to-head. We have in the studio with me now Gawain Towler, former Director of Communications for Reform UK and advisor Nigel Farage, and Rory Boyle, political commentator, both in the studio with me. We'll go straight into the stories that you're texting in about. It is, of course, always regarding what's going on with illegal migration in this country, particularly around how to tackle it. And Zia Youssef has done a big Sunday Times interview where he is with Harry York saying, or essentially doubling down on the reform plan announced recently by Nigel Farage in that impressive hangar just outside of Oxford, where mass deportations are coming illegal migrants' ways. Zia Youssef saying we will definitely leave the ECHR, we'll definitely scrap the Human Rights Act, we'll definitely derogate from the UN Refugee Convention, we will be willing to renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement. I think that is going to be a point of conversation. Obviously a very split Northern Ireland there, Gawain, when it comes to whether that's possible or not. Obviously the DUP very happy with that, SDLP and Sinn Féin certainly not. He also says that UK Deportation Command, which is going to be modelled on ICE, as we see in America, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, will be targeting solely males. That he has followed up on what people are reporting as the road back of Nigel Farage. They said women and children will not be deported. First of all, Gawain, are you happy to see what people are saying is a road back from Nigel Farage on women and children not being deported? And do you think it's realistic to say we could renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement?
Well, firstly, I don't think he's rowing back on that. What he's saying is we have priorities. You can, if you've got to do the first 100, you're not going to go for a child, are you? You've got to do the first 100,000, you're not going to go for the child, are you? You're going to go to the first 1 million, you're not going to go for the children. There's an awful lot of work to go before anything like that. So, row back, no, just pointing out where your priorities are. That's what I think that is. Why would? People aren't upset about women and children coming over. They're just not. That's not something that worries people. So, that's not the target. Simple as that.
And with the Good Friday Agreement, is the problem here that reform's marching people up the hill? It's going to be have everything that you want, and it sounds like it's easy and doable, but it's going to be incredibly legally hard.
There's no suggestion that it's easy, but there is a suggestion it's doable. You can do anything if you have the will and the backbone and the desire and the wish. You can do it. It was done in the first place. The Good Friday Agreement was created in the first place, and it can be renegotiated. Nothing created by mankind is set in stone, and things can change as the situation changes.
What do you think, Rory?
Yeah, I do agree with that I think it is possible that could happen. I also agree with the women and children point. Listen, I don't want to see any women and children sent back. I don't know anyone really that does, other than I'd say some extremists that I see online. But I do think, though, we have to address the fact that, OK, maybe there are a majority who don't want women and children sent back, but I think a lot of the rhetoric we've seen in recent weeks and months is very, very scary and damaging. Last night, I saw a video of a woman who is from the Philippines. She came here legally. She's worked for the NHS 15 years. She was attacked in a park, she and her daughter, by two people who they are asking if she come over on a small boat. They are being really aggressive with her. She was filming the attack to, you know, try and document what was happening. And I just personally feel like that's where this has got us. Essentially, anybody who is brown or clearly maybe not originally from the UK is now being attacked in the streets. Same thing happened.
I wouldn't say anybody.
Let me finish my point.
Bad things are bad things.
You know, then there's someone in Basildon who was putting up one of these England flags. Now, I personally don't think that the England flag in and of itself is offensive. I don't. And look, I'm Irish, so, you know, I've got a long political history with this country. But I think the manner in which some of these people are putting up the flags is also quite dangerous. So in this instance, this was in Basildon, there were a group of men putting up a flag. Woman gets out of her car. She's wearing a hijab. She has a young child with her. Don't know, you know, where they're from originally, but they live in the UK, and they were automatically racially abused and attacked. That's what's happening when this rhetoric keeps being spun and spun and spun. So I find it very dangerous and scary. So this point of, we care about women and children, we say that, but I'm not seeing that online.
Well, Gawain, just to push back on that, because in the interview, Zia is challenged about the himself and Nigel Farage saying fighting age males when it comes to people coming over on small boats. Zia says, look, people are grown-ups, capable of understanding what is going on, and it says that, look, the fact of the matter is there are some people coming from war zones who want retribution: Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq and Syria. And so, you know, it should the rhetoric be more carefully aligned, or, as I would probably argue, Gawain, and pushed back on Rory's point, is you cannot ever legislate for a few moronic idiots who seek to hijack an agenda to push their own very extreme divisive agenda, but they are a tiny minority, and the overwhelming majority of those putting up flags or concerned about small boats are patriotic people who simply want a sense of control in this country.
I think there's a couple of points here, and the slight pushback. Yes, there's some awful incidents. There are. There's other awful incidents, which is part of the reason why there's the protests.
Yeah.
But actually, the real reason there's protests, and the real reason these awful incidents come, it's not the rhetoric. It's not saying that 80% of the people coming over on these boats are young men between the age of 17 and 30, literally men of fighting age, coming from war zones, who have probably, in many cases, been involved in war, not unlike the people here. So there's that. But the reason why the rhetoric is there, and the reason why people are angry, is because of the failures of government after government after government. It's not Farage going on the box and saying something. It's the failure of policy for the last 25 years. That's why people are angry. And it's like blaming the cough rather than the disease. And you've got to address the disease, not the cough.
See, I just wish some people in this country would be more passionate about other issues beyond the migrant situation and show equal passion and protest equally about those. For example, again, going back to this women and children point, violence against women in this country is a huge problem, a homegrown problem. Let's take the migrants out of this conversation for a second, even though migrants are dominating every conversation across every political news programme at the moment. There's a woman killed by her current or former partner 4 times a week in the UK. That's a statistic we should be ashamed of, right? I don't see those same people getting riled up or impassioned about that, and that's what really bothers me. Is the migrant, to me, has become this caricature of this person who wants to come over here and sexually assault your wife and children and take your jobs, a bit like how in the US they've done the same thing with the Mexican person. So someone in Idaho who's never met a Mexican before has this caricature that Trump has created. They're doing the exact same thing here with migrants, and it's just driving me mad at this point.
I take your point about there are, of course, huge other issues that one should be following and dealing with, but I don't know, with the best one in the world, how one deals with partner abuse and partner murder. I don't think there is a legislative solution to it. I don't think there's, oh, you can do that, but you can. The vast majority of sexual assaults on women and girls in this country are carried out by the indigenous population. This is a fact, not by migrants. This is a fact. However, we've got to deal with that ourselves. Why are we bringing other people in from countries where it's 20, and we know Afghans are 22 times more likely than the settled population to commit one of those crimes. The point is, we know we've got this problem. We have to deal with it ourselves. Of course we do. But why are we bringing more to the table?
Well, I'm not sidelining the fact that, you know, we're bringing these people in. Look, I think there are too many people coming to this country illegally. I do believe that. But I think the very point I'm making is I'm not seeing an equal amount of people trying to address all of these different issues. It's like this migrant issue has become the sole focus that is going to be an era-defining issue, an issue that is the reason people go to the polls. But it's frustrating me that it's taking up so much conversation, because if we got rid of all of the migrants tomorrow that have sinister motives, we'd still have huge problems in this country. And I feel that Farage's campaign is singly focusing on this issue. I don't think many people who are going to vote for reform when we have our next general election can name any other reform policies.
I will say this, Roy, as pushback. We have seen Lawless Britain. That was actually Nigel Farage's entire summer campaign, which is about law and order, despite having Fraser Nelson tell us that crime has halved. Certainly not the lived experience of people on the streets, and certainly not the crime statistics I was reading out yesterday.
We've also going on about net zero. And it's interesting that the homework thief that is Kemi Badenoch.
Homework thief, okay. We'll go with that.
The thing is, do we report her to head teacher and can we get her expelled? I
don't know about that.
But you know, so there are other policies, of course there are. But we are very well aware that we're in the process of developing policy. We are years away from the general election. Nobody expects you to have the fully formed manifesto at this point. So as we go, this Law and Order, as Jonathan said, was our summer campaign. Some of that hits the migrant issue, but actually a lot of it doesn't. The issues with overcrowding in jails is not migrant-based. It's failure of government-based. And the policing the tweets, not the streets. The idea of a thought crime is far more important than real crime. Altering those agendas, that's part of our policy. That's what we've been talking about all through the summer. The reason why the migrant story is so huge is because of things like the Epping case. And the feeling that the government prefers those who come from abroad than those who come from here. This all ties into Starmer's Davos or Westminster.
I do think, Rory,
Davos rather than Westminster.
The problem we've got here is a situation where I agree with you. Of course, the cost of living and the economy should be number one. The NHS, what's the long-term solution to that? We're now spending more on the NHS than the entire economy of Portugal does as GDP. That's insane. We need to have a better solution for that, because it's clearly not working by just chucking more money at it. But I think the problem is, though, it's such a visible system failure to see small boats in rubber dinghies coming over, people being taken straight off into a hotel that's shut down. Having seen a Hilton hotel in Warwick, blew my mind. A hotel I've been to many times as a child growing up for different family events, boarded up and covered up, and then to see that hotel taken up, people giving 3 square meals a day, when the cost of living crisis means people are struggling to afford foods on the shelves, when we've got energy bills going up, your energy bills are fully covered for the migrants in these hotels, when we've got the state giving subsidies and support, with the NHS doctors literally coming to the hotels when you struggle to get an A&E doctor to see you anytime soon. I mean, that's the problem. It's such an obvious failure of the state, and I think if every other part of society was working okay, then I think it would still be angering people, but slightly less attention to it. But it is the epitome of why this government and the former Conservative government completely failed the British people.
Yeah, look, I understand why some of the images we see that are quite provocative images, and I understand why your experience at that hotel, it can be quite jarring and quite shocking. I get that. I also do think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and for example, Ryland's comments on this morning and all the backpatting he got after that.
Come on, he was a hero, what he said there. He spoke for common sense.
5 days ago, the right would have hated Ryland because he interviews lots of trans... Let me finish. Did you listen to Ryland's podcast with all the LGBT activists on there, all the trans people he was uplifting and supporting? Was everyone backpatting him for that 5 days ago? No. No one on the right was remotely interested in that.
You know, we can disagree at times. We don't have to want to cancel someone like others want to. Ryland spoke truth about illegal migration. Now the left want to cancel him.
I don't want to cancel him.
I disagree with Ryland around trans, maybe, for example, on certain things, but I don't want to cancel him. He has every right to have a different view to me.
Nor do I, and he's got every right to have that view, and he was on ITV, not BBC, so he doesn't have to be impartial. But some of the facts that he said were just a little shaky. That everyone's getting iPads, iPhones, NHS and reception 3 meals a day.
But from charities.
Yes, from charities.
Which the Home Office could stop giving. The Home Office could choose not to let these people have mobile phones.
The Home Office are not providing those things. And also, you know, Ryland's whole thing about if you show up at Heathrow without your passport, then you don't get into the UK. And
which you wouldn't do.
And instead you're taken to a 4-star hotel. Okay, for example, that hotel in Canary Wharf, the Britannia Hotel, let's not pretend like the migrants had access to the minibar and they were in there every night having some sort of champagne
3 meals a
jamboree,
day.
you know?
Delivery drivers, we saw the delivery vans, we know they've been illegally working in the black
starve
market.
to death in the hotel? Like,
Well, we know they were illegally working in the black market.
They weren't actually here at all.
Illegally working in the black market, I think one thing we really have to address, though, is companies like Boohoo, who got in huge hot water for allegedly, I'll say allegedly, working with these migrants and, you know, working them to the bone, essentially. I don't believe that that's their fault. I think the government needs to be harder on those companies as opposed to the migrants.
I think both are responsible,
Yes.
the government and the company.
Yes, you've got to go both ways. But the point is...
But not the migrants. I agree, the company and the government are responsible, but I feel bad for a migrant who's a woman who's come over here genuinely for refuge.
But how many of those, what percentage of them are women?
Well,
we
I
know
don't know.
three-quarters of them are men.
We don't know.
What was this on Question Time? The government minister stood there and said the majority of women and children. A government minister said this. We know that to be false. Their own statistics know that to be false. But the point is, you're right, the government shouldn't be starving people. Those people shouldn't be here at all. We should be detaining them when they arrive and deporting them back. Period.
I'm going to have to interject here. It's been a great discussion, and thank you so much, Rory, for giving some good challenge there as well. Do you agree with Gawain, or do you agree with Rory? I'd love to see the text coming in. Come in after the break. We'll be talking about whether Jacob Rees-Mogg would be a welcome addition to Reform UK, or does Rory think that Jacob Rees-Mogg's just another has-been Tory MP that shows Reform is maybe Tory 2.0? We'll see you after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk, and we've had a great show. 0344 499 1000 if you want to text and call in. 87222 for text, sorry, I should have said there, with the word Talk or a starting message. And at talkTV on X is another way to get in touch too. We go back to the head-to-head. We've got Gawain Towler, former Director of Communications for Reform UK, and a multitude of different political parties that Nigel Farage has been with during his time. Then Rory Boyle, political commentator.
One at a time.
One at a time. Well, at least, and actually, I should say, Gawain also now party board member for Reform UK, having successfully been elected, so he will be holding his leadership feet to the fire. Maybe a role reversal with the boss after years of time.
The image you've just put in my mind is something I'm going to have to cleanse with sulfuric acid.
Well, Gawain, look, it's been reported in The Sun that allies around Jacob Rees-Mogg fear that he's due to defect to Reform UK. He's made it no secret that he wants to return as an MP in North East Somerset and Hanham. There may well be a by-election in that area. Obviously, a current Labour MP under investigation for very serious alleged offences, all of which he denies. Jacob Rees-Mogg has, however, said, "There is no need to put me on defection watch. there is no need to worry. I mean, would someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg be welcome in Reform UK?
I think so. He would be welcome, but that's not the point. Jacob, cut him and he bleeds Conservative and Unionist Party. He actually, I speak to Jacob most weeks. I do his show on another place, in another place. And yes, he would love to get back, absolutely. But there's no way he's going to get back under any other rosette, because in the past, when he was doing the Brexit stuff and all the rest of it, he's great, he rebels, but in the final vote, he will always stay loyal. And if his conscience challenges his membership of the Conservative Party, in the end, his membership and his involvement in that tribe is, I think, more important to him than these things, because he sees the value of loyalty as absolutely vital to the good governance of our country. It's a shame, because I think he'd be great. We'd love him. He'd win it under a Reform banner in that by-election if it comes up. He won't as a Tory.
Rory, what do you think? Jacob Rees-Mogg, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We've had Sir Jake Berry, for example, former chairman of the Conservative Party, join Reform UK. We've seen a number of defections. David Jones in Wales, a former cabinet member as well. Anne-Marie Morris, who's now leading social care policy. Andrea Jenkins, who's now the Reform mayor for Greater Lincolnshire.
Adam Holloway.
And yes, indeed, Adam Holloway as well in Gravesham as well. I mean, is this starting to look, though, however, Reform is Tory Party 2.0? A lot of members text in saying we're not here. I know Gawain himself has said that there has to be a limit, there has to be a certain type of Tory, and that there is a certain time before the drawbridge is drawn up. I mean, it's an interesting time, isn't it, for Reform to get that balance right of bringing in experience of Parliament, but also not looking like a rehashed version of the Conservatives that failed so desperately.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to look like you're scraping the barrel. And to address your comments before the break, do I think he's a has-been? Well, I don't know if I'd say that. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Rees-Mogg, but I will agree with what you just said about you know, if you cut him, he bleeds Conservative. If somebody came to the UK and they knew nothing about UK politics and I had to give them the description of the most staunch Tory I could find, I'd probably pick him, right? I'm not a big fan of his. I'm not a fan of his views on same-sex marriage. He said that we should not be proud of that legislation. He also called abortion a cult of death,
well,
which to me
seems... is a hard-believing Roman Catholic.
Well, I'm from Ireland, I'm from Catholic Ireland, and I don't think those things.
Yes, but you're not... he is an absolutely devout Roman Catholic.
Okay, fine. Well, he's allowed to be Catholic, but I'm allowed to not like those views. Of course. So I think that, yes, he would fit into Reform well. And I actually think if somebody like him joined Reform, I do think Reform voters would see that as a legitimate politician that had joined the party. I don't think it would look like, you know, we're just breadcrumbing with new members.
I think you're right.
But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know where that story's come from, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
I tend to agree. I know Jacob as well, story. And I think it's a hopeful kind of story more than anything from someone maybe who's trying to flush out Jacob. I certainly know Conservative HQ. Certainly, I saw my own name up in lights in the Times and the Telegraph. In fact, when I had coffee with Gawain once, it ended up in Politico Spotted section. So I do think there's also an element here of trying to flush out people. They think there is certainly fears with Reform Conference just around the corner. There may well be some more high-profile defections coming Reform's way.
We picked up a member of the Scottish Parliament last week.
Your first MS in Wales as well.
A few weeks ago, we picked up MS in Scotland. It's sort of every other week we have another councillor defect to us. This is happening up, and it's not just your headlines. It's not just your Jacobs, and your Adam Holloways, and your Andrea Jenkins, and maybe even yourself. It's not just that. It's also at council level, senior council level. Our leader at Lancaster was a former council leader for the Conservatives. We've had, and that gives us the experience. But if we're looking at 450, 630, say, candidates for the next general election, if 10 to 15 are former Tories, this isn't the party's just a bunch of former Tory retreads. It really isn't.
It's not, and also...
And just because it's in the news, that's 630 odd candidates, of which 10, 15 may be former Tories, leaves us with another 615 who are Reform through and through.
Yeah, and also, you know, I think speaking more generally as well, you know, political views can change, views can evolve. We don't have to be cynical 100% of the time when somebody jumps ship to another party. That's life. That happens. We are all evolving. Our thought processes evolve. What's happening politically in the country changes, and that can make people change their minds. But we do have to be careful about certain people. But I think generally speaking, we're allowed to change our minds and switch parties. That's not a crime.
I think I pretty much stopped evolving in about 1780.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I didn't, but, you know, that's fair enough.
Well, there we have it. Well, after the break, should we bring back national service? The Express saying that on the front page today, they don't think, most Britons say they would not fight on the front line for their country. Barry Davies, a long-serving commentator for the BBC on shows like Match of the Day, saying he is concerned that there is not a patriotic bone left in this country, and if we don't have national service, then people will not understand. Do my panel think national service is on the rise again, or will we learn the lesson after Rishi Sunak put that in that disastrous manifesto from 2024? We'll see you after the break.
I've had a woman on the phone to me who's just called me crying because her little girl's moving from primary school to secondary school. She doesn't want to send her back. Last night there was a lot of very angry people at a demonstration whereby people were saying to the police, there's 500 of you here in meat wagons and riot gear. Where are you when these children are coming out of school? Where are you when these migrants are hanging around the streets, drinking, harassing girls?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Some interesting text coming in, listeners. Jonathan Gullis here for Alex Phillips on the home of common sense. That is Talk. Any Tories that defect to reform are late coming to the battle, from John in Waddington. I would think it's Conservatives 2.0 if Jacob Rees-Mogg ever joined reform. Quite an interesting take there. Never seen one of those before. And to Gawaine's point around jails, the issue of overcrowding in jails is a direct result of immigration. If the foreign criminals were deported, then the overcrowding disappears. I've got to say, David, on that text, whilst 10,000 foreign national offenders do indeed blight our prisons, I still think there is a major prison capacity issue. The Conservatives tinkered, never did anything about it, and I think that Labour's about to get rid of sentences for under 12 months. That is a plague on all houses, and I think Reform is right to say you have to increase the size of the prison estate, whilst also deporting foreign national offenders too. Rory not looking impressed with me there. Go on, Rory.
Look, we can build more prisons, we can jam more people into prisons, but I think what we really need to do is look at some of the reasons of why people are going to prison.
Because they've broken the law.
Drug crime is a huge, huge issue in this country that has never been properly addressed in, I would argue, the last several decades. We need to fully legalise drugs. We're going into a really different debate here.
No, Rory,
let's do that
Rory.
another day.
We will do that another day. You've triggered me successfully. Well done. I'll be banging my head on the desk later on. We do not need to legalise drugs. Blimey.
David liked that when I said that one time.
Oh, well, there we go, great. A charge against the Reform Party chairman.
If you go back into one of the many Farage appearances on Question Time, he suggested that legalisation wasn't necessarily the wrong way.
Interesting.
You've got to
I'll be
look at
very
the
upset if that becomes Reform policy, Graham.
And at the time, he also said there's no way I can make it policy of the party because they're not going to agree with me. But the point is, one does have to address not just the criminality, but also the excess. The idea of smashing the gang doesn't work. The war on drugs has failed.
Yes.
So what do you do instead? There has to be a serious... I would have a Royal Commission across the board on the imports, where it comes from, who's making it, the whole way through the supply chain.
Yeah,
Rory might roll his eyes, but I love El Salvador, and I'll have El Salvador on steroids in this country. I'll be banging up people left, right, and centre.
That is one
hard yards.
That is a different approach.
Which I think is an element of reform policy in some senses with certain things.
Well, my grandma told me not to say anything nice. You've got nothing nice to say, so I'll just say I love Salvador, Brazil.
Well, look, this great story in the front of the Sunday Express saying most Britons would refuse to fight for their country. It found that 64% of those asked in exclusive polling for the Express said they were not willing to fight in defence of their country. This comes off the back as well of Barry Davis, a BBC commentator, saying that he thinks bring back national service, it did him the world of good when he did it, and he warns that we won't recognise what is English quite soon as well, expressing anxiety about national identity and cultural change. I mean, Gawain, are we going to see national service form part of maybe a Reform UK future policy?
Almost certainly not. If you were to try and do that, and as Rishi found out, it's not a particularly popular policy, but if you were to try to do that, I suspect you'd have a resignation of what's left of our army, because you would turn them all into nursemaids. We have a very small professional military these days.
Disgracefully small, which the Conservatives take every blame for.
But if you basically say those people who are trained and good spend their time nursemaiding a bunch of people who don't want to be there, well done. What have you got? Nothing. You've literally got nothing. So, one, I think it's bad for that purpose. If you want people to fight for your country, make it a country worth fighting for. Have policies that actually set our country first. Make the economy better. Stop denigrating our history. There's a whole series of reasons. Why would a young man or woman join up to risk their lives to fight for a country they've been told is rubbish?
Rory, obviously, Gawain's roused me a bit there, but go on, Rory. What do you think?
Well, what I think is, there's some points I agree with there. I think that, yes, Sunak found out that it's not a popular policy. It wouldn't be a popular policy if any party brought it in anytime soon. Also, though, we often bang on about how the younger generation are addicted to their games consoles and are doing nothing all day but snacking and are lazy. Like, do you really think those people are ready to join the military and fight for this country? Whether you agree with that or not, frankly, they're just not. It's not going to happen. It's a ridiculous idea. That would lose Reform so much support from people who are maybe on the fence about voting for them at the moment. So, terrible policy idea.
And if I can have a quick 20 seconds from both of you, the front of the Sunday Times has this incredible polling done by More in Common that says Starmer's votes for 16-year-olds would give a boost to Corbyn's new party. He actually found that if under Corbyn's new party gets going, 24% would vote Labour, 23% vote Reform UK, and 21% vote in Corbyn. I mean, Rory, is this Keir Starmer's gamble, I would call it, to gerrymander the electorate to back him, going to blow black in his face?
I don't know. I think we've still got a long time to go until the general election. Really quickly, I'll just say, big Corbyn fan, think Corbyn could genuinely be the most legitimate threat to Reform and Labour going forward, but still, we're at a very early stage in this fight, so I think we've got to see how things play out a bit more. But yes, Starmer is obviously trying to get more votes, more young votes for Labour.
It is constitutional gerrymandering.
Yes.
And it's also, I think, this is the same government that doesn't trust an 18-year-old to buy a cigarette. It doesn't trust... then they talk about, at 16 you can serve your country. Yeah, but you can't go to the front line until you're 18. At 16 you get married. Actually, no, you can't anymore. And there's a whole bunch of things that have been used as excuses as to why 16 is right for this. And you can't, actually. They're lies. But, I mean, it is what it is. You have seen, I think we have seen... I don't know. When I was a child, and I've had teachers telling me one thing, my natural response is to think completely the opposite.
Mine too.
Yeah. So if you get a bunch of teachers ramming a whole bunch of prop down people, prop down their pupils' throats, guess what? Those pupils are going to turn around and say, "That Farage, interesting bloke. Yeah, I'll go for that."
I don't know if I'd have said that, but you know, you never know.
Well, there we go. Look, interesting take there. Thank you so much to Gawain Towler, former Director of Communications for Reform UK, and political commentator Rory Boyle for joining us here in the studio. What do you think, listeners? Are you excited for a potential Corbyn or Farage-led rise to 10 Downing Street? 03444 499 1000 if you want a WhatsApp voice note, and call 87222 is how you text with the word talk at the starting message, and you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, there's still more news to go. We'll be looking again at that terrible decision around Epping. What does that mean for the future of that community? Is it something that we need to be concerned about for the safety of our women and girls?
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People schmiggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer is on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work.
It's crap. It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels, and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good Good morning, Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the Weekend Breakfast Show. Delighted to be on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. And what a show. We've been having an amazing head-to-head there, taking you through stories as votes at 16 looks like it'll be something that Keir Starmer will regret, with both Reform UK and your party, led by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, to benefit greatly from that. Also, we've seen the story about the Epping Hotel, people inside the hotel, the illegal migrants, thanking Sir Keir Starmer for taking legal action to prevent them from being turfed out, as well as having the Church of England sticking its nose in the news of the day, which is about how to solve illegal migration. In fact, even having a go at Nigel Farage, the Bishop of York, who's the current acting head of the Church of England, thinks it's his place to give his opinion. Well, guess what? Stick to teaching the word of the Lord and making sure that you are turning people to Christ and building up your congregations would be my advice. And then Jacob Rees-Mogg, is he about to join Reform UK? Gawain Towler, former Director of Communications for Reform and now party board member, is not so sure. He thinks you cut Jacob Rees-Mogg open. He bleeds conservatism, but let's see what people think. And Angela Rayner, turns out her partner has been working for a lobbying firm who one of the clients of received £280,000 in a grant. There is no suggestion of any legal impropriety at all, but Angela Rayner having a tough week, obviously buying that flat in Hove, and then turns out using a tactical ploy, it appears, to avoid having to pay a certain additional extra £40,000 in stamp duty, as well as having the previous argument over her Vicarage Road property, which she sold in 2015, where there was a debate over her capital gains tax exemplification owed. However, an investigation was undertaken in that case, and she was completely cleared of any wrongdoing, for clarity. So we go to our next guest very shortly, but before then, let's read some of the text. Illegal immigration is such an issue. It affects every aspect of our lives. Crime, NHS, housing, schools, welfare, the economy, infrastructure. That's Sean in Bridlington. That goes back to Rory Boyle's point, where he was like, it's important that we look at other issues. Sean saying it impacts every single one of those. Helena, East Lincolnshire, absolutely love Jonathan Gullis. More, please. That's very kind of you indeed. For that kind text. These illegal immigrants should be put up in tents, not hotels. That text in from Sharon. Another one here, Ogachi, regarding Donald Trump, who we spoke about earlier. If that fool Ed Davey won't attend the state banquet, why isn't that place being filled by Nigel Farage? And if it isn't, why? He's a pal of Trump, and it will look very petty and spiteful. Oh, that's the PM all over. That's Bill in Cheshire there. Another one here from Dell. This country has lost its identity where you can't fly the flag of your nation, but Palestine flags are all okay. What a joke. Another one here. I'm an Englishman, Jonathan, who has friends from almost every Commonwealth country. We can think, and we all think the same. And we want the same. It's just the politicians who haven't the courage. It's all me, me, me. Another one here. Jonathan, I'm sick of hearing the government has legal duty to provide for asylum seekers and they have a right to it. These people have entered the country illegally and broken our law. They said the Uber service by Border Force and the RNLI mean that. Effectively, our own government are people traffickers. A strong message from Steve. Steve, I'm sure the government would push back and say they are not people traffickers. They're simply doing their legal duty, which is to not lose life at sea and therefore bringing people ashore. However, people are getting pretty miffed off seeing French naval vessels guiding these small boats to the 12-mile point where English Border Force take over and then return the French the life jackets afterwards. It's all a ridiculous joke, isn't it, listeners? Well, 0344 499 1000. How you WhatsApp, call and voice note 87222. If you want to text the word talk or starting message, and at talkTV is how you message and follow us on X. My next guest, his name is Councillor Matthew Goodwin Freeman, a Conservative councillor, joining me down the line. Sorry there, Matthew, I was making you a mere commoner by not using your full title. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. I'm enjoying a wonderful British weekend away at a campsite down in the New Forest and loving the sun and the cuppa. So well,
there we go. And I see you're still Operation Flying the Flag is going for you.
Always.
With this T-shirt there. Matthew, let's quickly talk about the Church of England. I know you and I think, have got strong views on this. If you don't mind, Matthew, I'll just play a quick clip of the Bishop of York speaking with Trevor Phillips of Sky News, where he has to stick his oar in when it comes to the issue of illegal migration.
Response to those people who are saying policy should be, you land here unlawfully, you get locked up and you get deported straight away, no ifs, no buts.
Well, I'd say to them, you haven't solved a problem, you've put it somewhere else and you've done nothing to address the issue of what brings people to this country. And so if you think that's the answer, you will discover in due course that all you have done is made the problem worse. So don't misunderstand me. I have every sympathy with those who find this difficult, every sympathy, as I do with those living in poverty. But I don't think we should, we should actively resist the kind of isolationist, short-term, knee-jerk, send them, in this case, send them home.
Let's put a name on it. Is that your message to Mr Farage?
Well, it is. I mean, Mr Farage is saying the things he's saying, but he is not offering any long-term solution to the big issues which are convulsing our world, which lead to this. I see no other way.
Well, there you have it, Matthew. The Bishop of York, who's currently basically the acting head of the Church of England, sticking his oar into politics rather than focusing on spreading the word of the Lord, making sure that those young people who have been turning to Jesus and Christ self-voluntarily without the help of the Church of England remain a feature. Instead of taking a knee and talking about reparations, actually invest in the church estate. Rather than doing the duty of the church, they instead want to pontificate from the pulpit in their spare time about petty politics rather than the word of the Lord, to instead talk about illegal migration, and that people like Nigel Farage are just saying isolationist, short-term, knee-jerk things. I mean, this is the same Stephen Cottrell, Bishop of York, who was found to, has been demanded to resign by the Bishop of Newcastle, saying he lacks moral authority after he twice appointed David Tudor, both in 2013 and 2018, one of which was after a £10,000 compensation was given to one victim of David Tudor's, who was found guilty of sexually abusing minors and barred from being with children, who eventually was suspended and booted out in 2019. The hypocrisy is rank, is it not?
Absolutely. I mean, the Archbishop of York should stick to the day job, some would say. Let him focus on building up congregations. As someone who grew up a Christian, I want to see churches strengthened in this country. My wife and I, we got married last year in our local parish church, and we managed to fill the church with one of the busiest days in the entire calendar. That's what we've got to do. We've got to build up churches in this country. But instead, we see archbishops focusing on the politics. I'm sorry, but please get back to the day job. Leave the politics for the politicians. And if he really thinks that what he's saying is what the public want, then I urge the Archbishop of York, go and stand at the general election in Clacton against Nigel Farage, and let's see who wins.
Well, that's a very good comment indeed. I mean, isn't this just the bore that we keep on hearing? Woke Welby injected himself into all sorts of progressive issues in order, let's be frank, to get some cheap likes on X and try and become a media darling in the celebrity class. But isn't this the problem, as you say, with the church hierarchy? Actually, most congregations are small c conservatives. They want to go to church because they want to understand the teachings of the Lord. Yes, people then try and spin and apply that to modern day politics. But when you go to church, we're not going to church to have a political sermon, we're there for a religious one.
Absolutely. When I go to church, it is very much, we don't talk politics. We're here to talk the word of the Lord. I do not find it acceptable that we're blending the two. There are different places in society for these conversations. In our family, politics is for around the dinner table. I know in other households it'll be you don't dare talk politics around the dinner table. But, that's what it's got to be. I really urge the church, please focus on the day job. Stop getting involved in politics. If you want to get involved in politics, then go and stand in the election.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Matthew. Next one we go to is Jacob Rees-Mogg has been rumoured to be on the verge of defecting to Reform UK. He has strongly denied that, saying there's no need to worry or put him on any defection watch list. He isn't going anywhere. But obviously this would be, would it not, a huge coup for Reform UK if they could get someone of Jacob Rees-Mogg standing?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. We need to find out what Reform members want at the end of the day. That's the most important people at the end of all of this. Every political party, whether it's, the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dem, SNP, Reform, it's all about the members. The members are the bread and butter of a political party. So really, I think, actually, let's see what the members want. Do the members want Jacob Rees-Mogg to come over to Reform? If they do, then, maybe it will happen. Jacob has been very clear throughout all of this, it's not going to happen. I do think, as you were saying in the introduction, if you cut Jacob Rees-Mogg open, I think he bleeds Conservative blue. It's whether that can be made slightly more turquoise blue.
Now, Matthew, some people would say that was a lovely pitch to potential Reform members, some of whom may want to see Councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman amongst their ranks? Are we about to see the big beast of local democracy join Reform UK? Would you be tempted?
I'm far more interested in getting my bacon butty off the camp stove and enjoying this wonderful British weather that we're having. I mean, last night we were the only tent left in the gale force storm, but that's what we do: dig deep, keep calm, and carry on.
I would say that's a very good politician's answer, which I'll spare you some time from having to try and come back on there, Matthew. I'll save you on that one there, only because I've been on the receiving end of those very questions myself. Zia Yusuf, deportations, he's doubling down on what's been said. He says these are fighting age males, that he's not sorry for using that term. We know they're predominantly men between 18 and 39 years old. We know that they are obviously coming from countries, or they claim to come from countries that have had recent conflicts in them. There will be people amongst those with very medieval attitudes, particularly towards women and girls, as well as maybe some very nasty views towards our country. In fact, some cases probably very nasty views as well towards Israel, which this country is also and should always be an ally of in the face of terror that they have to live through every single day. I mean, do you have an issue with using the term fighting age males, or do you think this is just some people getting their nose out of joint because they can't handle the truth?
I mean, I can't think of a better phrase to use to describe them. I'm sorry, but when I grew up, or, you know, everyone's watched the film Titanic, you know, it's women and children first. I'm sorry, but there are, well, other than one Labour MP who seems to think the majority of people on these boats are women and girls, there are hardly any. It is men, young men coming over who then can apply for asylum, wait until it's granted, then bring the rest of the family over. Now, whether that's because the men are going to survive the journey through the dozens and dozens of safe countries to get here, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, I have no problem defining them as fighting age fit young men, because guess what? That is exactly who they are. Call a spade a spade.
And Matthew, we obviously last spoke on the show, in the studio, in fact, when there was the rumours around what we're expecting Reform UK to announce. We've now seen Nigel Farage with that impressive press conference in an air hangar outside of Oxford outline the deportation plans, 600,000 mass deportations over the course of Reform UK's first term in office. I mean, derogate from the UN Refugee Convention on and the agreement on against human torture, scrap the Human Rights Act, leave the ECHR, introduce a British Bill of Rights, immediately arrest all those who arrive on our shores, detain them in disused military bases, creating 24,000 spaces with Nightingale-style holding cells and deportation zones. I mean, is this all stuff you love to hear? Is this the type of thing that you hope the Conservatives might announce at their conference?
Well, that's exactly it. I am hoping that the Conservatives, as Reform have done, say what needs to be said. That is the way politics has gone. We need to be talking the truth, regardless of how hard it is to hear, regardless how hard it is to say. We need to be saying it as it is. The facts, the spades, the spades. That's what we need. And that's exactly what Reform have done. I read through their deportation plan. Yes, I get the criticism that a lot of it is copying what the Conservatives have put in their bill, but the fact is that the current polling, it's not the Conservatives who are going to form the next government, it's Reform. So, you know, the Conservatives, Reform, anyone who is in opposition needs to be selling their vision for the country. This is what we would provide as a difference, and that's what I've been saying to Conservative colleagues since July the 5th, the day after the election. We need to be getting out there, apologise for the mistakes we made in government, and say this is what we would do differently. Let's see if we see it at conference, but right now Reform have got it, and Reform have their conference next week, which I'm sure is going to be very interesting.
Conservative councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman enjoying himself from his campsite in Hampshire. Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, what do you think? 0344 499 1000. Are you convinced that this deportation plan will work? Are you hopeful that Nigel Farage gets into 10 Downing Street, or do you think it will simply fall flat and raise expectations and therefore disappoint? 87222 is how you can text the word talk or starting message, or message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, we speak with royal commentator from the Mail on Sunday around whether or not Her Majesty the late Queen Elizabeth II was indeed a Remainer or Brexiteer, and how she felt about Boris Johnson proroguing Parliament, which was then found to be unlawful. We'll see you after this break.
I've had a woman on the phone to me who's just called me crying because her little girl's moving from primary school to secondary school. She doesn't want to send her back. Last night there was a lot of very angry people at a demonstration whereby people were saying to the police, there's 500 of you here in meat wagons and riot gear. Where are you when these children are coming out of school? Where are you when these migrants are hanging around the streets, drinking, harassing girls?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk for Weekend Breakfast, sitting in for the incredible Alex Phillips, taking you through the final minutes before I hand over to the fantastic Peter Carver, who'll take you through from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And what a show we've been having so far. Lots to discuss. And we now go to a nice little segment here with Charlotte Griffiths, Royal Commentator and Editor-at-Large for the Mail on Sunday. Hello, Charlotte, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, we've had some quite extraordinary claims. There's a new book being put out by a Valentine Lowe. I think the book's called Power and the Palace, the inside story of the monarchy and 10 Downing Street. Yesterday, it was revealed that the Queen was a Remainer, although albeit a reluctant Remainer, would that be fair to say?
Yes, the book by Valentine Lowe, he's a brilliant, brilliant journalist, so we can probably take his claims as pretty accurate. Although I have to say, the idea that the Queen has admitted to being either Remain or Brexit in private seems suspect to me. But this is what happened. She said privately, look, it's better the devil you know, we should probably stay in. But until recently, we always thought she backed Brexit because of a Sun headline back in 2016, which said the Queen backs Brexit. And although that was kind of denied at the time, it's always just been assumed that the Queen, you know, can't really stand bureaucracy in Brussels and probably being the Queen and being old and posh, probably, you know. But actually, it turns out, no, she's a bit more circumspect than that. And, you know, she did dislike bureaucracy, and she does think that it's, you know, not an ideal and very institutionalized place. But she did actually think we should stay with Europe, and, you know, especially because, you know, she knew all about world wars better than anyone, and she thought cooperation was ultimately the primary goal. And, you know, she was probably very relieved to see that, you know, Europe's unified, having lived through a world war.
Well, I think, as you say, that would have been, I think, a main driver for Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, because ultimately, as you said, she literally lived through that Second World War, was on the front line, obviously driving lorries. Her father, obviously, very much on the front line, keeping the morale of the nation together, whilst also working with his wartime cabinet to make sure that we could fight and fend off Nazi Germany. I mean, ultimately, it makes sense. But, I mean, do you think has it caused many rumbles in the jungle? Will it upset some royal courtiers, maybe, who think that these type of things shouldn't have got out? Or, as you say, will there be suspicion that this bit's hard to prove, because the Queen was very good throughout her career as the monarch, never really giving any view on any position away?
I think the palace is very annoyed about this, because they feel that she's obviously died and she's not really here to form an opinion. They can't brief one way or another because she's not alive to check. But even if she was, they wouldn't comment. And they've been quite lofty, I think, and sort of said, you know, she would never speak about this. I have to say, this is the one thing about Valentine Lowe. I mean, I just trust him so often, but it's just not really like her to just offhand tell somebody she barely knows, oh gosh, you know, I back Brexit, or I don't back Brexit. You know, she was very discreet, and she knew how important it was when there was a very divisive subject such as this. She knew she couldn't let anything slip, and she was an incredibly wise woman and a very good queen. So if feels to me unlikely she would have just told somebody outside of her very trusted inner circle how she felt about Brexit.
And then another story today in the Times, following up, as you say, on that Valentine Lowe book there, saying about Boris Johnson's proroguing of Parliament. Well, obviously, we know it went off the rails. He was literally hiked before the court, found to have illegally prorogued Parliament and forced to bring it back. It's saying here that the Queen was basically expecting some kind of apology, feeling that she was dragged in to the politics, and an apology which never came. I mean, what more can you tell us?
Well, yeah, this is actually quite bad because Boris Johnson disturbed her holiday in Balmoral, and that is, you know, the most sacrosanct time in her calendar. You know, the one time this woman works 365 days a year, except for when she's in Balmoral. So she was not best pleased to find Jacob Rees-Mogg turning up, Boris Johnson turning up, demanding that she approve something that was unlawful. And there's a sort of gentleman's agreement in politics that you don't embarrass the monarch. And they were asking her to do something embarrassing and turned out to be unlawful, and disturbed her holiday, and disturbed her elderly corgi, who had to be shuffled out of the room when Jacob Rees-Mogg came in, and she struggled to get the corgi out. So, you know, don't come between the Queen and her corgis. But Boris Johnson has now admitted what we all thought was that he obviously apologised and did the gentlemanly thing, and indeed Number 10 sort of briefed that out at the time. But now he said he did no such thing. He didn't apologise. And not only that, but during the same time, he went to go and see Charles at Birkhall during his premiership, and upset King Charles as well. So it turned out what we're learning from this book was that the Boris Johnson era was not a good time for relations between the royal family and Number 10.
Which is quite ironic, isn't it? With Boris Johnson's background in Etonian, for example, Oxford University, you know, you would think that he was very much part of that kind of establishment, but it seemed that the Boris car can cause chaos in all sorts of circles, regardless of how royal or not they are. I mean, this will reflect badly, will it not, on Boris Johnson? I mean, I think most people always admired the reason for why he tried to break Parliament. Obviously, the politics of that was to try and force that early election, which ultimately, look, he would argue was successful in the end. But of course, as you say, we're not dragging yourself into the politics here. But obviously, what people would say is that, look, if you knew you were being a bit cheeky, a bit naughty, if you knew you were going to do something that was certainly going to be legally challenged and probably lose on the balance of it, the very least you could have done is said to Her Majesty, I'm very sorry.
Definitely, and I so agree with you. You would have thought Boris Johnson, of all people, would be very polite. He went to the best school in the country for, you know, you would have thought they'd be treated well and taught how to be polite to the Queen. But interestingly, in the book it said that he fears no man. So I think, and also that he hates apologising, absolutely hates it. But you would have thought he'd make an exception for the Queen, if nobody else in the whole world, the Queen. But no, apparently not. He did not make an exception. And the other thing I think is quite rude is, did he really have to go to Balmoral? I know there are you know, processes around these things, but she'd actually already given her approval over the phone. But to actually kind of go up there, and it was a whole rigmarole, and Jacob Rees-Mogg was taking selfies in the airport, so it became a real circus, and there were photographers waiting and press waiting, and the whole thing, it was highly disruptive to her holiday. And actually, at her great age, she kind of probably needed a holiday. She was 93 at the time.
Well, as you say, actually,
on so many levels, it was so rude.
Well, as you say, actually, that's a great point, isn't it? She had given permission on the phone already, albeit I'm sure she had been told that this was probably going to be quite ropey for Boris Johnson at the time. But as you say, to have the camera crews, the TV crews, the political theatre entering her space was not something that she relished or enjoyed, let alone, as you say, at Balmoral. I mean, is this a good lesson for future Prime Ministers, that if, you know, the rule should be to do everything you can, or do you think King Charles might quite like the theatrics of this type of politics?
I don't know. I don't think he did like the theatrics. When Boris came to visit him with Carrie at his place near Balmoral, apparently he turned up, he wasn't focused, he was a complete mess, he was all scruffy, he wasn't really interested in being there. That really annoyed Charles as well. So I don't think he does like the theatre. Like all royals, Charles finds Balmoral as his sanctuary, and they do feel they are justified to have a month off. Mainly because Parliament's off, and mainly because it's August, they do feel, all the royal family feel, that when they get to Balmoral, that is where they are to be left alone. You know, they work on Christmas Day, delivering the Christmas, you know, Queen's speech or the King's speech now. They work, you know, Princess Anne works more than any other royal. She does an engagement nearly every day of the year, and that is their special time. So although I think Charles probably does like a bit of the theatre, you know, he's also got cancer. If anyone disturbed him this August, it would have gone down very badly.
Yes, and I think we all know that the future king, William, is certainly not one for really wanting to engage with the media in any straight sense or manner, and certainly would not enjoy being dragged into this kind of politics. That is Charlotte Griffiths, royal commentator and editor-at-large for the Mail on Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your views. The texts have been coming in on other stories we've been discussing in the day. What is the bishop waffling on about? The problem? We have to solve the Middle East out now, do we? No. We need to save our country, women and kids. That's from Michelle in relation to the Bishop of York saying that it's a knee-jerk, short-term isolationist viewpoint of Nigel Farage and others when it comes to tackling small boats. Another one here. Reform should bring in Dominic Cummings to sort the civil service out as soon as they get in. That goes back to Will Kingston earlier on, who said reform needs to be putting people on in the driving seat who will be able to help deliver on the agenda if they're serious. Great show, Jonathan. Robin Williams Gullis. Jonathan, Robin Williams. Yeah, with my good one. Well done looking after Alex's spot. Jeff in West Sussex. That's very kind of you indeed. Another here. The bishops have destroyed the church due to wokery and sleaze. The Bishop of York should concentrate on restoring faith in the church. Mick in Wallington, I couldn't agree with you more there. What's the term for an MP that moves from an unsafe seat to a safe seat? And it's suggested with Angela Rayner allegedly leaving Ashfield to Hove. Keep up the great work. Glenn in Leeds, I think you're suggesting that she might be doing a chicken run. Someone who's realising that her time is up in her seat, maybe trying to seek a new seat elsewhere where she's guaranteed to remain a Labour MP. Another one here, going back to when we had Will Kingston on earlier on. Do you think the recent weeks of peaceful demonstrations have worked, or are politicians relieved that the peasants aren't rioting so they can ignore it? I think the protests and peaceful demonstrations have worked. I think the establishment is terrified. I think Number 10 has been scrambling all summer to try and come up with answers to questions that they clearly haven't prepared for. And I think that if people in any way relent on the pressure they're putting on through peaceful demonstrations and then back that up with votes in the ballot box, then this Labour government will be allowed to get away with it far too often. That's me so far. We'll be having more after the break. Richard Holden, Member of Parliament for Basildon and Billericay, as well as the Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, will be in the studio taking us through the big stories of the day. So make sure you tune in. 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to 87222 with your message to follow, and message and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you soon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis in for Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk, and what a great show we've been having so far. Lots of texts, lots of calls, not so many voice notes so far. Disappointed by that, but you know what you need to do. 0344 499 1000 to call us, voice note and WhatsApp. 87222 if you want to text in with the word Talk or a starting message, and message and follow us on X at talkTV. In the studio, Conservative Member of Parliament for Basildon and Billericay. Actually, my former office mate when it came to Parliament. True. We literally shared the same office with our staff. And, of course, the now Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, a department that he served in whilst also in government, having also been the former chairman of the Conservative Party. Hello, Richard, how are you?
Very well, Jonathan. How are you? How's the family?
They're all good, thank you very much. They sent
I saw some lovely pictures of you at a wedding recently. I think you might have been involved in that in some way.
Yeah, I got married. I got married and then attended another wedding of a friend of ours who used to work at CCHQ, who apparently his in-laws are not necessarily so much fans of my political views. So I made sure not to cause any ruptures. I stayed away from that table. Well, Richard, a big story on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. Kemi Badenoch due to give a speech in Aberdeen, I think this week, where she's going to basically drill the North Sea dry. She's going to say she's going to delete the mandate of the North Sea Transition Authority and replace it simply with extracting every ounce of oil and gas that we can, pointing out the fact that, number one, Boris Johnson did introduce the word transition in the North Sea Transition Authority. That will go in the bin. That was done in 2022. That Ed Miliband has doubled down on the net zero agenda, which actually has seen 4 bill rises of around £185 rather than the £300 cut as promised. In fact, the latest energy bills going up purely not because of wholesale gas prices, which are actually going down, because of the green levies in energy and investment into solar, wind and etc. that's being placed on household domestic bills. I mean, this obviously also protects 1,000+ jobs in an important part of north-east of Scotland. I'm sure you'll be welcoming this. Is this something that people need to hear from the Conservative Party?
I think this is absolutely something that people need to hear from the Conservatives. I think it's pretty clear, right, especially at the time, you know, Norway are actually about to grant new licences, and we are literally, at the moment, Ed Miliband is trying to sign up to get us that gas in from Norway on their new licences, yet won't allow us to drill it on our side of the North Sea at the present time. So it's absolutely crazy that we're going to, at the moment, offshore those massive capital tax receipts that you get from every bit that gets extracted, all the jobs and the taxes that they create. You know, this is absolutely crucial to Aberdeen and the entire northeast of Scotland, and it's crucial to the UK as well, because it's about our energy security. Look, Norway's a perfectly decent partner to have, but we're not purely reliant on Norway for all of that, and we have some really good defence relationships with them, but we're not purely reliant on Norway. You know, there's countries around the world that we're going to be importing oil and gas for decades and decades and decades to come. Why on earth we shouldn't be doing it in our own backyard is crazy. So this is something I am 100% behind, and I'm really glad to see that she's really taking the fight, actually, both to Labour and the SNP, who've been all over the place on this issue over the last few years.
Interesting, isn't it? Because Stephen Flynn, leader of the SNP down in Westminster, is an Aberdeen MP, so he knows that for jobs in his community and for his electoral future that they need to protect them, but at the same time goes very much against the SNP agenda, which was to ban and continue to ban all off North Sea extraction of oil and gas. And as for Labour, well, Ed Miliband seems to be like Rachel Reeves, given carte blanche to do what he wants, and then Keir Starmer wonders why he's so unpopular, and then just reshuffles his decks in number 10, thinking that a different former Blair advisor is somehow going to bail him out.
Well, no, quite, and you're absolutely right about the SNP's position, because they also were in coalition, if you remember, with the Green Party in Scotland. So they were going all down this sort of this line as well, in order to try and get their nationalistic ambitions over the line and try and break up our country. But this is exactly the right thing to do, and I know our guys up there, Harriet Cross, a great new MP, came in at the last general election, but Andrew Barry as well, you know, has always really fought for the oil and gas jobs right across the region, and I think it's going to be a big thing actually for the Scottish Parliament elections, which are coming up next year as well. You know, there's going to be a real divide there between especially now, between what Labour and the SNP are up to and what the Conservatives are actually offering in Scotland as well. So I think this is quite an important moment as well, especially because Kemi has reversed that decision to go for net zero. That has been, I think that's been, the implications of that are only really starting to come through, and this is one of them. And it's a massive change for us. So a really positive one. Also one welcomed by the Sunday Telegraph. I see in its editorial comments as well today. But a big move in the right direction.
And how do you feel about someone like Gawain Towler? You'll know him well. He's a good character. He's claimed that Kemi Badenoch is the homework thief, that she's stolen Reform UK's homework, who have long pledged to scrap net zero and protect the jobs and drill baby drill in the North Sea. How would you react to that charge?
Well, I think it's all very well if you've got 4 or 5 MPs depending on the week to say what you like on that. I think the truth is that we're coming at this from a proper thought-through policy perspective. Kemi's obviously doing this in stages, and it's great to see, I think, when we're making these big moves, that we're also showing that behind them is all of the homework, because that's where I think Reform got a bit unstuck this week when it came forwards with its deportation strategy, and it then changed quite a lot over the subsequent few days. I think it's right that you've got to get the work in there to get the policy right at the end, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing here from Kemi. Oil and gas, absolutely crucial to the future of the North Sea, and we need to get behind it.
Well, Zia Youssef, talking about that reform deportation policy, he's done an exclusive interview in the Sunday Times where he has said to Harry York that he doesn't make any apologies for calling people fighting age men who are coming across on small boats into this country. We know they're overwhelmingly, even if Darren Jones, Labour Chief Secretary of the Treasury, doesn't, men between 18 and 39 years old. Yes, I mean, I've seen some car crashes. That was definitely up there with one of the best.
So I've done some of them, Jonathan.
We've seen, I think I've also taken part in a fair few myself. And then we've also seen, obviously, that Zia Youssef has said that it's simple. They're going to leave the ECHR, scrap the Human Rights Act, introduce a British Bill of Rights. We're going to derogate from the UN Refugee Convention, derogate as well from the Agreement Against Human Torture, something that's actually very controversial because not even America has chosen to do that themselves. Introduce a £2,500 voluntary return system where you get £2,500 if you take yourself away. I mean, he's obviously outlining and building on what Nigel Farage has already outlined. He did also cover what I've called and others have called a roadback, which is Nigel Farage initially said women and children be deported. Now it's just the men who are coming over will be deported. Gawain Towler said, well, it's the men who are the majority. That's the problem. I use Gawain Towler again because he is now a party board member for Reform UK. I mean, Richard, surely this is lots of stuff here that the Conservatives like. Isn't it about time? Someone like me would say, Rich, it won't shock you, Conservatives and Reform sat round a table, agreed on this policy of mass deportation of illegal migrants, and then put the offer jointly towards the British people. That puts the interests of this country first and foremost, instead of getting into a scrap with each other when you don't need to.
I just worry a little bit about... I think there's some sense in what's being said here. I worry about what Reform have come forward with. Richard Tice, just a few weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast with him, and he was saying we need to be taking 10, 20, 30,000 people a year from France after doing a joint processing centre in northern France. Now, it does appear in recent months that Richard Tice has been slightly sidelined within the Reform hierarchy. But the fact that you've got their deputy leader in Parliament coming forwards with different ideas to now what looks like Reform's new policy. But again, as you said, Jonathan, they have changed that policy again slightly over the last year. Look, I'll be totally frank with you. If there are women coming here from who shouldn't be here, they should also be deported from the UK. I don't quite understand why Reform have got themselves into this sort of mess on this space. And I would just also slightly just say, when it comes to Zia, I mean, it was only a few, weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, that he resigned from the chairmanship of Reform because he was upset about the ideas about trying to stop the burqa. And that's why he resigned as their chairman. And now he's coming in and he's there's nothing so zealous as a convert on some of these policy areas. And it does appear to me a little bit that Zia is going perhaps over the top in trying to prove himself, given his weakness when it came to the burqa. It's just quite an interesting dynamic that's going on there, as everybody vies to be the number 2 in the court at the top of Reform.
Well, you understand, Richard, that a grumpy ex-Conservative MP like me would push back and say that when we were in government, much of that deportation bill was put down as amendments on the Safety of Rwanda, now called Act. Lots of Conservative MPs, 200 plus, voted against it. Only 60 voted for them. That was people like me. We went on to be the sacrificial lambs at that last general election. So where's the credibility factor here? Because I look at a lot of those Conservative backbench MPs, some of your colleagues, 70% of them, I think, are spineless wets that shouldn't be in the Conservative Party. I don't trust the word they say to deliver, because they were the same people busy telling me in the tea rooms that if we end up talking about immigration too much, we'll make it an issue. Well, actually, it was an issue regardless of how much we spoke about it. So how's the Conservative Party going to regain credibility?
Jonathan, and I think you make a very fair point on that. I think the Conservative Party has got to make that clear that it's in a totally different place on migration. I think you actually saw it when we put forward those amendments recently to the Borders Bill, where we were basically saying we need to get out of the Human Rights Act. We should derogate from the Human Rights Act on all of these issues around immigration and asylum. Interestingly, that is now a policy that Reform are basically going down the same line of, let's get away from that. So I can see why Gawain might want to spin it one way. It's pretty clear that it's actually the other way around, that they've seen actually something which would work, which we put forwards just recently and voted on in Parliament, and now they're saying, well, that's actually a way we should go in some of those areas as well. But I think your broader point, Jonathan, is right, is the fact that actually it's absolutely essential for, I actually think, in two spaces for the Conservatives to really regain credibility. One, yes, is around on immigration and asylum. I think Chris Philp and Robert Jenrick have already started doing a lot of work in that direction. The other is around the economy and our economic credibility. It's quite clear that Labour are helping us in some ways on that, showing that what Rishi said before the election, there'll be £2,000 of family tax rises. Well, it looks like it might even be more than that, given what's going to happen this year. But we've also got to have a credible vision for the future as well on both those areas. I'm not saying that we're there. We've still got a long way to go, but I think we're starting to get the foundations in. And I think we can start to build on some of those. I think the truth is that, Labour came in promising change. People have seen change. It's just not been changed for the better.
No, indeed. And look, there's this other story in The Sun that's suggesting that Jacob Rees-Mogg could potentially defect to Reform UK. He has given a quote that says there's no need to put him on any watch list. He's not going basically anywhere anytime soon. If someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg was to go, would that be a loss to the Conservative cause? Would you be sad to see them go? Or, as Kemi said, they're just not real. He would not be a real Conservative.
Look, I don't want to see anybody. I actually think it's quite clear. What I really worry about in British politics is we've got a party with 120 MPs in the House of Commons and a party with 4 or 5 MPs in the House of Commons. It's pretty clear where the main opposition is coming from in this country, and that's coming from the Conservatives. I already mentioned about the amendments we're putting forwards on the immigration bill, or bills that I've been putting forwards, trying to ban first cousin marriage, which has been adopted by the party as policy. We're really going forward.
I wonder what your party, which Jeremy Corbyn's now linking up with those independent MPs who actually tried to prevent your bill going through.
Quite, look, I think we've got to be robust and across the board on this stuff. That's where I'm coming from. I know Jacob pretty well. He did a fundraiser for me in Basildon and Billericay last year. I think Jacob's pretty solidly on the Conservative side of things. I think what he wants to see is actually people coming together behind the leadership, because I think when Kemi's really coming out with stuff like let's get drilling in the North Sea, getting rid of some of that green crap as David Cameron would have once called it, when we're leading on the immigration bill and now Reform are sort of coming in behind on some of that, I think you can see us in the right place, and especially when Labour are all over the place. But not only just all over the place, actually damaging the country, it's really important that we concentrate on what we can deliver and also shine a light on some of their hypocrisy as well.
Well, talking about the hypocrisy, this Labour government has claimed that they will end the use of migrant hotels by 2029. The key word there being by 2029. They kept saying that they shut hotels. Actually, it was to be fair to the Conservatives, they had closed 200 hotels with Labour trying to piggyback off. It then turns out, actually, hotel use is up 8%. We're just cramming more people into hotels, 32,000 in the hotel estate as we speak. We've seen that, what I think is a disgusting decision regarding the Bell Hotel in Epping, where, as an Essex MP, you will know from your constituents, there are genuine safety fears regarding that hotel, where there have been 3 individuals charged with crimes from arson to sexual assault, all of which are alleged, as they deny them at this moment in time, but will, of course, face a future trial date. The mums of Epping have been out on the streets, the Pink Ladies, as they nickname themselves, largely peaceful protests. I mean, how angry are you to see this Labour government take on basically the people via the courts, and then it turns out they were using human rights ECHR legislation to make the argument that the rights of the illegal migrant trumps the rights of the people of Great Britain. And therefore, do you hope at party conference, as an extra question in there, Richard, to see Kemi announce that we will have a party position to leave the ECHR?
Well, Jonathan, look, I can't comment on what might be announced at party conference. Now in the shadow cabinet, it's a bit more difficult for me. But look, it's been my
you'd like to see it,
it's
maybe,
been my
Richard.
position for a long time that it's quite clear we have to get away. And it's not just the ECHR, it's also some of the other conventions which have established themselves in British law, and I think have been over-interpreted. Interestingly, to hear Jack Straw and David Blunkett talking about this last week, genuinely amazing to hear them saying, actually, this was never our intention, because it was always meant to be advisory. You know, you can listen to what the ECHR said, but you don't need to adopt what it says. Our courts have taken that with some of these activist judges in a totally different position. They've absolutely gone hell for leather for whatever has come across their desk. You're right to point into this direction, because it's absolutely something that needs to be looked at. And when it comes to Epping, you know, my constituency is just down the road. People really are concerned. They are concerned, and it's not just in one place. It's right across the country. They're seeing their towns and amenities in those towns. Often the hotel will be the place where people get married. You know, local hotel will be the place where people get married, have wedding receptions, or celebrations for families and things like that. And I really do think that when we're looking at this, a lot of these communities have seen what would have been their sort of local venue turned into something completely different. That's why getting deportation started was so important. That's why a deterrent was so important. That's why the Rwanda scheme was so important. And, when it comes to... I look back on some of those, the run-up to the general election, and Keir Starmer saying, we're going to smash the gangs, that's the only way we're going to do anything. And now seeing numbers up 50% crossing the channel. And I just think to myself, I just cannot believe that we didn't manage to hold him to stronger scrutiny on some of this stuff, which I think is probably the reason his poll ratings have collapsed the worst of any Prime Ministers, I think, ever. Because he promised so much and has so comprehensively not just failed to deliver that, because he's not even tried to deliver it. He's undone even the prospect of being able to deliver it. And I think that's why there's such anger out there at politics in general, because they've seen a Prime Minister come in with some promise there, right, but who has comprehensively failed.
Richard Holden, MP for Basel and Billericay, Conservative Shadow Secretary of State for Transport. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you, Jonathan.
On Talk. Well, you know how to do. You text and you call in 0344 499 1000 87222 if you want to text with the word Talk in the starting message, and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
a woman on the phone to me who's just called me crying because her little girl's moving from primary school to secondary school. She doesn't want to send her back. Last night there was a lot of very angry people at a demonstration whereby people were saying to the police, there's 500 of you here in meat wagons and riot gear. Where are you when these children are coming out of school? Where are you when these migrants are hanging around the streets, drinking, harassing girls?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everyone, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips. This is indeed the home of common sense. I'll be handing soon over to Peter Cardwell on Talk, taking you from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Let's get to some voice notes. Jack.
Good morning, Jonathan. Now imagine being in this country with the Prime Minister being thanked by an illegal migrant over his own people. His own people in this country do not want to thank him for anything at the moment. It's ridiculous.
I think you feel the sentiment there. Yes, illegal migrants want to thank Keir Starmer. I don't think anyone else in the country does. Elaine, what does she want to say about the Bishop of York?
Great show. Just on the Archbishop, he should be known as the woke of York, not the Archbishop of York. And where is he coming out in support of all the grooming gang victims, the sexual attack victims? Where is he there? Great show. Bye.
Thank you very much, Elaine. I think you make perfect sense there. Darren wants to tell us about the Epping ruling and Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Morning, Darren from Suffolk. Great show as ever. 2 points. First of all, the Labour car crash this week. Instead of spinning it Alistair Campbell style and saying, look, we've closed the first hotel in Epping. We promised we'd do them all in this Parliament, but you've got to trust us. We're going to do them all in our own time frame. You've got to do it properly. You know, instead of doing that and trying getting people on their side, they've just challenged it, and that's just alienated everybody. Whoever's advising these people are complete muppets. Now, let's talk about Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, not everybody in Reform has come from the Conservative Party, but a lot of the people have. And what we remember is we abandoned the Conservatives because there are too many Liberals in their party. They'd all been Conservatives and all followed through the Brexit and left the ECHR. They probably would still be in power, but this is the problem. So you need good people as long as they're going to follow the Reform and cancel net zero and leave the ECHR, etc.
A good test there for future potential defectors. Judy also wants to tell us about Jacob Rees-Mogg and Reform.
Good morning, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg would be a good addition to Reform. You see, a lot of the Conservatives can see the way the party's going and they don't like it and they feel more in tune with Reform. So I think he should be welcomed. In fact, I think they all should be welcomed if they wish to join, so long as they've got the right ideas. I myself, many, many moons ago, were a member of the Labour Party till Tony Blair sent my son to fight in an illegal war, and then I fell out with them. Then I joined UKIP, and now I'm a member of Reform. So everybody welcome. Thank you.
And final one from Pete. I will fight for my family, not for the government.
Jonathan, what is wrong with all these people? You fight for your family and your country. You're not fighting for the bloody government we've got in charge at the moment, that useless bunch of idiots that should step down before they totally destroy the country. 3 more years of illegal immigrants, 4 more years of illegal immigrants. What the hell is this country going to look like at the end? And to be honest, in my opinion, it could well be a 5th column army we've got in here. So our fight will be taken up by the people on the streets, because then otherwise we're done.
Well, I'll always love hearing the voice of the people. I know one man who loves hearing the voice of the people too. His name is Peter Cardwell. He's taking you through from 10 a.m. after I step aside to make sure you get the latest and breaking news. Lots of ministers out on the media rounds and obviously opposition spokespeople too. Peter, what are you going to be looking at today?
Hi there. Yeah, we'll be speaking to Mark Francois in the studio in a minute or two about national service. Should it be brought back? Also, would you fight for your country? A lot of people say they wouldn't. The pressures on young people as well. 16 and 17-year-olds say they want the vote, but we're actually after one of them this morning. All my mates' friends, they're all asleep. They're like, oh, they're asleep. Oh, they're out last night. Oh, no. I'm trying to get a 16 or 17-year-old for 11:30. If you're a 16 or 17-year-old or the parent or grandparent of one who wants to come on to talk about literally really straightforward, do you want votes at 16? Yes or no? What's it like having come through lockdown? You know, are you glued to your phone? Really straightforward stuff. We'll get you on Zoom in Vision at 11:30. Give us a ring on 034